IB Nation, welcome back to another edition of the Irish Breakdown Podcast. Glad to be joined by fellow Notre Dame fans. And as Aiden Reagan just said, it's either Reagan or Regan. If I got that wrong, I apologize. But as my guy Aiden said, it is going to be an elite mailbag today. I'm excited. I'm fired up. You guys know the drill. If you want to get a mailbag question in, you've got three things you can do. You can put an MB on there so they see it. You can put a mailbag emoji, or if you want to get your mailbag question kind of put up to the top of the list, go ahead and throw a super chat in there, and I will get that as quickly as I see it. As soon as I see it. I don't always see it right away, but as soon as I see it, I will get that up in there. So we can talk about whatever you guys want to talk about, football related, preferably today. But some of you might have some other questions that you want to get into, and I might let a couple of those through. We'll see. But we're going to talk Notre Dame football. We'll talk Notre Dame recruiting if you guys want. Talk college football, whatever you guys want to discuss. I know we got some Ohio State fans in here, some LSU fans in here, and just some other fans of other programs. Roger Dodger jumps in here sometimes, USC fan. He's probably feeling good so far about his team. But whatever you guys want to talk about, let's get into it today. So as I said, hit the MB on there, hit the mailbag emoji, or do a super chat. Super chats are also easier once the show starts. I always prefer super chats, but they're even easier to see. So just keep that in mind as we get ready to rock and roll on today's Irish Breakdown mailbag. Notre Dame football mailbag, Friday free-for-all. We're going to start. My dude, Iden Banami, got in here early and loaded up with the questions. So we're going to start with him today. And Iden asked, do you think Rocco and Coogan can improve moving forward, or they, for the most part, are who they are now? Look, there's certain things that can be improved upon in regard to the play of them as part of the unit, right? Like, let's say the timing isn't great early on between Rocco and Emil Wagner. I'm not saying that's the case. I'm just saying that can be the case sometimes when you've got new starters, or maybe Pat Coogan's snaps aren't quite getting there the way that Riley Leonard liked them, or maybe the combos with him and Sam Pendleton aren't quite hitting with the right timing. Those things can be improved upon the more reps they get, right? And that's part of improvement. Is Pat Coogan all of a sudden going to go out there in 3 weeks, or is Rocco Spindler going to go out there in 3 weeks and have faster feet, quicker feet, better athleticism? No, those things don't get better, but their play can improve as they get more comfortable and confident in the line. And even though they're seniors, I do think there's areas for both of them to improve, because they're still both guys who really only were one-year starters. And so I think there's some technical things. So, for example, Rocco's a senior. He's not going to all of a sudden go from running a 4.9 in the pro shuttle to a 4.4 in the pro shuttle by the end of the season. But can Rocco do a better job of sinking his hips or not? It's really dropping his knees a little bit, bending a little bit better, driving a little bit with his kind of his hips instead of just using all of his upper body brute strength. Can that be improved upon? Yeah, absolutely. Can Pat Coogan do a better job of working his feet through contact when he engages? Yeah, absolutely. Those things can be improved. But the talent's not going to get any better. And that's not a negative. That's not saying, oh, they suck. And it's just by the time you're a senior, your ability is your ability physically. That doesn't mean that you are who you are technically or experientially and those type of things. When Joe Walt was playing last year, that's who he was. I don't know how much better he could have got. He was a 3-year senior or 3-year starter. He'd kind of seen everything. He was advanced physically. There was nothing that was like going to cause him to make like a big jump during the season like he did in 2022 when you saw Joe really improve throughout the year, because he was still a sophomore. He was still developing physically. By the time you get to your senior year, you are who you are physically. But it doesn't mean that's you are who you are as a player, because you can always improve aspects of your skill set, or you can improve your ability to maximize your skill set even more the more experience you have and the more that you play. And those are areas where he can certainly improve. And so Pat and Rocco can both improve. We do have a super chat from Chief Brody, USC by 74.5, and Indy wins by 25. Don't make me laugh today, man. I got sick the other night, and I had a really rough night, and my lungs and my ribs hurt really bad. So when you make me laugh, Chief Brody, it causes me a lot of pain. So don't make me laugh. That is really well done, man. USC by 74.5. I think Michigan's defense is a little bit too good for that one, but I do have USC winning this football game. I had USC beating LSU in the opener as well. I told you guys this offseason, I think this is an improved USC football team. D'Anton Lynn's part of that. I thought losing Caleb Williams is going to make them a better team, and that's not a knock on Caleb Williams. It was more of a knock on Lincoln Riley, who I felt put too much on Caleb Williams at USC. Now it's back to running the offense and scheming people up and spreading the ball around and making it about your system and making it about your skill and not making it so much about your quarterback. I thought having an offensive line that was more homegrown to a degree worked better or was better for them. So those are areas where I thought. And then, of course, D'Anton Lynn was there. I've talked about how I liked what USC did from a transfer portal standpoint this offseason. Of course, they went to the portal. That's what they're gonna do. But they went out and got good players, good steady players, not the big name free agents, so to speak, but just good football players. And I think that's helped USC be more of a team, a little bit more hungry, and they're more physical because of the addition of D'Anton Lynn. So we'll see if they can continue it, right? I mean, they had a really good first game against LSU. We don't know how good LSU is. I know there's a question about that in the chat that I'll get to. So there's still a lot we're learning about a lot of these teams. Like, boy, that 51-10 win over NC State looked pretty good for Tennessee. Well, then let's say we find out NC State's really a 4-8 football team this year. They're not going to be. That changes things a little bit. So we're still learning a lot about who this team is and who all these teams are. But I think tomorrow, we're going to learn a little something about USC because for all of Michigan's struggles, I think they're still a pretty physical football team. And LSU is not. And that's not a knock. It's just that's not their style right now. But we're going to see if USC can kind of play that big boy football in Midwestern football on Saturday. Because it can't just be about the athletes. It's got to be the athletes plus your ability to play physical in the trenches. And we're going to find out if the Trojans can do that on Saturday. Got a question from Aiden. And Aiden, can you do me a favor? I know you're listening to the show and you're still locked in. Is it Regan or Reagan? Can you because I've seen it REGN. I've seen like one of my favorite comedians, Brian Regan, spells it like that, but I've also seen people that spell it like that where it's Reagan. Where Reagan's normally spelled R-A-G, but I just would be curious, man. I want to make sure that I'm getting your name right. So if you could just let me know if it's Regan or Reagan, I'd appreciate that. But Aiden asks, an Irish Breakdown studio would be awesome to see. Could you ever see a world where you set that up for you and Vince? Yeah, I mean, it's potentially way down the road. It's a bit of a challenge to kind of get that done. So, I mean, we actually had an investor a couple years ago that had wanted to do something like that for us, but the terms weren't something I was uncomfortable with. But great guy. He just wanted to make Irish Breakdown an even better product. But yeah, I could potentially see that. That's way down the road for me, and not something that I'm necessarily overly concerned about right now. There's other things that I am spending money on in infrastructure and people and things like that. But potentially down the road. Look, I don't anticipate Irish Breakdown being right where it is now for the eternity. But my focus right now is on making the product we have now the best it's going to be, and then hopefully growing, and hopefully the economy improves and different things get better, and we can find some different ways to create some different revenue streams and really get this thing going. So. Yeah, but someday maybe. John A1 with a question. Do Al Golden and Al Washington need to consider using Oben as a pure package player like he was at Duke? Well, he wasn't really a package player, Duke. I don't believe that to be a proper explanation or description of his role at Duke. I wouldn't call him a package player. I would say it had more to do with the fact that at Duke he was more used in a more specific way, even as part of the base defense. So I don't know that I would call him a package player. And then the other part of it too is the package he was used for at Duke, if you were to call it that, or the role he had at Duke was more of a one-dimensional player that was just primarily a pass rusher. And I don't believe that is something that would really be beneficial to Notre Dame right now. I don't know that that's something that I would view as like he adds a skill set that the other guys don't have as a pass rusher. And that was his primary focus at Duke. I mean, look, he was the number 2 leader in snaps from the defensive ends last year at Duke. The top guy had 447. He had 404. That's not package player reps. I think what Notre Dame needs to do is honestly, like, look, I get it. 3 games in, and we're just assuming that everybody that's who they are. And in some instances, guys are just they are who they are. In other instances, especially guys that are new to a system, they are going to get better. They are going to improve. They are going to do some things that allow them to be more effective and more productive. I mean, let's not forget that last season, right? When we talk about Howard Cross and his All-American season, let's not forget that Howard Cross did not get his first tackle for loss in the season last year till the Duke game. That was the 6th game of the season. So he didn't have more than 6 tackles in a game. He had his breakout against Duke, and then he got a lot better after that. That happens sometimes, guys. Not everybody comes out of the gate lighting the world on fire. I wish he was better, and I'm hoping that as the season goes on, that Howard kind of has a similar ascension as the season goes on. But, sometimes that doesn't happen. Last year, Javonte Jean-Baptiste last season for Notre Dame had 10.5 tackles for loss, led the team in tackles for loss. Right, had a very good season for Notre Dame last year. Through 3 games, he only had 1 tackle for loss, and that came against Navy. So these guys are all going to evolve and improve, and even veterans sometimes will go through a season and they're better than what you thought that they would be, or they're better than where they were when the season started, and that happens. Riley Leonard is not a finished product. That doesn't mean he's going to get better. He could get worse. He could struggle even more. Teams start doing more things to him. He could end up having even more problems than he's having now. He could also get a lot better. He could end up staying the same. Guys are not locked into who they're going to be in game 3. And I know sometimes we think that's the case, but that's not the case, especially for guys that are in the system and kind of new. I'll give you another example. Last year, through 3 games, Javonte Jean-Baptiste finished the season with 38 total pressures. He had 16 total hits plus sacks on the quarterback. Through the first 3 games last year, he only had 2 pressures, and he had 0 hits or sacks on the quarterback through 3 games. Now, the next, 10 games, he had 16 of those. But it took him a little while to really get rolling and really get comfortable in the offense. We saw that from Thomas, or in the defense. We saw that from Thomas Harper a little bit when he transitioned over last season. So guys are not finished products right away. And I know that we kind of think they are because they're 6-year seniors. But I remember a conversation I had with Marcus Freeman this summer. And we were discussing, I had asked him a question about, I thought it was really fascinating to look at this Notre Dame football team and say, you've got all these 6th-year and 5th-year players that are played a lot of football. You've got Howard Cross and RJ, Howard Cross, who's a 6-year senior, and Jordan Patelho and Riley Mills, who are 6-year, 5th-year seniors. Jack Kaiser's a 6th-year senior. Xavier Watts is a 5th-year senior. And then you've got some of these transfers coming in that are veterans. You had Rod Hurd's a 5th year, Jordan Clark's a 6th year, RJ Open's a 6th year. And then on the flip side of it, you've got a bunch of puppies. You've got Drake Bowen and Jaden Osbury, who are sophomores. You've got Kingston, who's a true freshman. Jalen Sneed's a redshirt sophomore who hasn't played a ton of football. You've got Christian Gray, who's a sophomore. You've got Adon Schuler, who was a sophomore. You had all these young players. And he was like, I'm not worried about the sophomores because they've been in the system for a year. I'm more concerned about getting the transfers ready to go because those guys are new to the system. They actually have the most to learn from what we need from them. So you kind of made the point, like, you look at a sophomore defensive lineman, that guy's going to have more experience in this defense than RJ Open, for example. So Boubacar Traore has more experience in this system than RJ Open. Now, that doesn't guarantee that RJ is going to get better. It doesn't. It just means it's a little too early to be just kind of saying, okay, well, he is who he is. Let's roll. Because we would have maybe done that with Javonte Jean-Baptiste last season through the first 3 games as well. And that's the thing that I wanted to point out, because yes, we can acknowledge that what RJ Open is doing right now is not even close to being good enough. Like, you will never hear me defend how he's played, excuse away how he's played, try to spin it in any kind of positive way. I don't do that. But what I can also say is, but that doesn't mean that this is who he is. And that's the thing I wanted to get across. I mean, two of the 4 lowest graded games of the season last year for Javonte Jean-Baptiste were in the first 3 games of the season. Right. So let's just see how RJ evolves. Now, here's the thing, if we get into the bye week and certain guys have shown no improvement, then you have to start at least be able to have a conversation of, okay, are we using this guy appropriately? Are we using him correctly? Has someone else earned more reps? But through 3 games is not necessarily the time where I'm ready to just say, hey, listen, this guy's got to go, or this guy has to have his package completely changed or his role completely changed. So I would say the same thing about KK Smith, or not KK Smith, Chris Mitchell, right? And just because Bo Collins got in more comfortable early on doesn't mean that Chris Mitchell won't. And those are the things you have to figure out as a staff. Now, that doesn't mean that you just keep trotting guys out there who aren't making plays, John. I'm not saying that either. I just think there needs to be a little bit more patience. You need to evaluate a little bit more of what's happening. Are you seeing growth? Are you seeing improvement? Do you see a potential breakout coming? And that's what we're going to have to find out if RJ Obens has the ability to do that. Got some super chats popping up. Lucky Ducks 512. What did you learn? Thank you for the super chat, by the way. What did you learn from? I'm ain't going there. Thanks for the greatest NT content around. Go Irish. Sign up for the message board, folks. Yeah, I'm not even going to say those words, but they had me. I should have known because of who tweeted it. I should have known that it was not serious. That's on me. But I saw that. I was like, you got to be kidding me. You have to be kidding me. And they had that outlet on, their NBC show, and he goes on their channel. So, I mean, it was understandable why you would think that they actually had a scoop on that one. But I was glad to find out that wasn't true. I was going to have some words on that one. I was going to definitely have some words on that one. I appreciate the super chat. Tyler Evans, thank you for the super chat. Cal versus Florida State. Who wins, why, and give me UCLA over LSU. Hey, you can go ahead and waste your money on USC, or UCLA over LSU, but I don't think that's happening, man. Have you watched UCLA play this year? They are hot garbage. They are hot garbage. I mean, look, LSU didn't play very well against South Carolina last week, but South Carolina was coming off of a 31-6 beat down to Kentucky, and then the next week Kentucky goes and takes Georgia down to the wire. Maybe South Carolina's pretty good and better than I thought they were going to be. But UCLA is just bad, and they barely beat Hawaii, who's not good. They needed 2 field. Actually, they were down 13-7 late in the third quarter against Hawaii, and then they needed 2 fourth-quarter field goals to beat Hawaii. Hawaii had a win over Delaware State, and then a week after, only losing to UCLA by 3, they lost to Sam Houston State 31-13. So, yeah, Hawaii stinks. UCLA is not good. I have a feeling LSU is going to have a bit of a get-right game against UCLA and smash them. And, yes, I think Indiana's a better team. I had a question, from Joseph Barrett. What do you think of IU start? I mean, look, it's too early to tell. We don't know how teams are going to be long-term, but you can't look at what they've done the first couple games and not – but they're 3-0, right? And they played Florida International and beat them pretty good. They beat Western Illinois 77-3. That's a team that Northern Illinois beat 54-13 in their first game, and then they smashed UCLA. The question, though, is but are any of those teams any good? Right? I mean, Florida Atlantic beat FIU by 18. Now, FIU beat Central Michigan pretty good, but I don't know how good that team is. I don't think UCLA is very good. So we have to see a little bit more. But I got to tell you, I like what I've seen from them so far. The big thing about Indiana is in the past years, they've actually played scrappy defense. Their defense hasn't been good, but they've been scrappy on defense for a couple years. Back when, it was like the early years of the Tom Allen tenure, they had a couple good years on defense where they were scrappy. They've been pretty bad on defense in recent years, but I think they have a chance to at least have a competent defense. The question has been, can they score? And the only time they ever really had a good offense was when Kalen DeBoer was there. And then the year after he left is the only time they really had good offenses. And this year they're looking pretty good, man. They got Curtis Rourke in from Ohio as a transfer. He's a very experienced kid. He's thrown for a lot of yards. I think he's had at least one, maybe a couple 3,000-yard seasons in the MAC. And so you got a veteran player in there, and that helps. And Kurt Cignetti did a great job at James Madison, an absolutely great job at James Madison. So, we'll see if they can keep it going. But he certainly made Indiana a destination place for some quality transfers this offseason, and we'll see if he can keep that going. But We're going to find out a lot more about this football team here in the next couple weeks, right? And as you look at Indiana's schedule, and they've got Charlotte coming up, that's a game they should smack Charlotte. But then, Maryland at home is going to be a quality opponent. Maryland just smacked Virginia. You play at Northwestern. They've got a pretty scrappy defense. And then you've got a home game against Nebraska. So, I mean, there's a chance they could be 6-0 or 5-1 in ranked going into that Nebraska game. But I like what I've seen so far. I know there's a lot of people that are subscribers to Irish Breakdown that are also kind of co-Indiana fans or any of their number 2 team. I've never had an issue with Indiana. I like when there's more good teams out there. So hopefully Kurt Signetti can keep that going, and I would hope he would stay. I mean, that's the thing that you gotta, that kind of has to suck if you're like an Indiana fan, right? Like, Kurt Signetti's the real deal. What if he goes out there and he's really good? Well, how long is he going to stay? And hopefully he falls in love with Bloomington and decides to stay. So, yeah, we'll see. He's doing a great job right now, though. Great job right now at Indiana. And so we'll see. But to the other question, Cal versus Florida State, I honestly don't know what to make of this game, honestly. I mean, I like what Cal's done so far. I talked about them in the preseason that I thought they could be a bit of a sleeper team. They've certainly been that so far, 2 convincing victories over UC Davis. I don't know if UC Davis is still good, but in the past, they've been a really good FCS team. They absolutely blew out San Diego State 31-10. San Diego State's not very good this year. They're 1-2, but they handled business. They went and beat them convincingly. And then, of course, they went on the road and beat Auburn. So they're not going to be intimidated by Florida State. They're going to kind of smell blood in the water. But it really comes down to this, Tyler. It's what version of Florida State do we get? Do we get a Florida State team that finally says, okay, enough is enough, and they come out and play hard? If they come out and play hard and they play with a little bit of fire and a little bit of, hey, we actually want to be here, then I think they'll beat Cal. If they play like they have in recent weeks, then they're going to get beat again. I mean, just a soft football team. I don't know that can get fixed. I had somebody say this. I don't know if I said this on the show, but I had a friend of mine talk to me. He's like, dude, I'm getting 2016 Notre Dame vibes from Florida State, and it could even be worse. And he's spot on, because at least Notre Dame was competitive in their losses. I mean, when you think about how bad Notre Dame was to start the 2016 season, I mean, they didn't win a whole lot of football games, but they were competitive. They lost by 3 points to Texas. They lost by 8 to Michigan State. They lost by 3 to Duke in a game they led. They lost to NC State by a touchdown in a game that was tied until second half on a blocked, I think it was a blocked punt, right? That they scored on, basically got the ball and scored on. They lost by a touchdown to Stanford in a game that it was competitive. They lost by a point to Navy in a game where Navy scored late. They lost by 3 points to Virginia Tech. Their first double-digit loss didn't come until the last game of the season when they lost by 18 to a red-hot USC team that was just absolutely annihilating people. And 2 weeks prior had gone on the road and beaten number 4 Washington, who made the college football playoff that year. And if you remember, I mean, I think it was like first or second play of the game, Josh Adams rips off like a 74-yard run, and Notre Dame takes an early 7-0 lead. They just didn't have the horses that game. And they had like a punt return for a score and I think an interception that they took back for a score. But Notre Dame was hanging with them for a while. And that team at least showed some fight. This Florida State team is showing no fight at all. I mean, they act like they just don't want to be out there. And there's some big-time lessons that your boy Mike Norvell's learning this year about how to build a team. And if I'm him, the next time one of my players jumps in the portal and says, hey, I'm only going to stay if you give me more money, I'm telling them to take a freaking hike. Because all the guys that did that last season are playing like they just don't care this season. And I have a feeling some of those guys are potentially going to find out that maybe they should care a little bit come NFL draft time, because there's a lot of bad film being put on display for NFL teams to look at from some of those guys. So it's a bad situation, man. Really bad situation. And I don't know, like, I can't predict now that they're going to bounce back. I mean, you kind of think, well, if this team had heart, they would have bounced back after the Georgia Tech loss. Well, if they had heart, they definitely would have bounced back after the Boston College loss and how embarrassing that was. And they didn't. And then you're like, okay, so now I'm supposed to assume that they're going to bounce back from the Florida State or from the loss to Memphis. I just, man, this team, this is just not a good football team. It is not a good football team at all. They got outgained by almost 100 yards at home by Memphis. Now, Memphis is a good football team. Don't get it wrong. But You 238 yards of offense. This is just a team that has no heart right now, like no heart. And I don't know when that light comes on. I really don't. I really don't. And somebody said people underestimate how hard it is to replace 2 first-round defensive linemen. That's not the problem. It's not. I mean, there's plenty of teams that replace guys like that, and their step back goes from 13-0 to 10-3. You don't go from 13-0 to 0-3, and you're losing to Boston College, Memphis, and Georgia Tech. And then you've got potential high draft picks, but those guys aren't playing well. This is a team that's got way big. Like here's what y'all have to understand. This is not about they lost too much talent. This is a team that lost talent and has no heart. There's talented players on that team. There's potential NFL players on that team. There's at least all ACC caliber players on that team. This team has no heart. And you say, well, BC's a really good team. They're not a really good team. BC so far has been a good team, but they're not a team that should go on the road and pound Florida State into oblivion. They're not that team. Florida State made them look like that team. And that's the whole point. Yeah, Memphis is a quality team. They were my group of 5 pick to go to the college football playoff this year. But you didn't lose that game because you lost Jared Verse and Braden Fisk. You didn't. That's not why you lost those games. You could say maybe the Georgia Tech game, but you bounced back from that, and they haven't. So this isn't about losing guys. This is about this team has no heart. This team has no heart and no toughness. They're playing soft. And I don't think that Jared Verse and Braden Fisk alone were the reason that team played completely different. I mean, you look at the offensive line. They have 3 starters coming back that are 6th-year seniors that have started, I think, something like 100 games together, and they suck. Like, that's not because of the defensive lineman that they lost, right? And so, I mean, this is a team that has no heart. And again, Steven, like you said, I called a 4-loss Florida State. That's cool. 4-loss. I had other people were saying the same thing. I thought they were going to be better. I had them at, I think, 10-2, 11-1. I thought they'd be better. I was wrong. But this is going to be a way worse than a 4-loss Florida State team, right? Like you get that. They're 0-3. If they don't fix this, they may be a 4-win team, not a 4-loss team, but a 4-win team. I mean, think about it. If they play the way that they have so far, if they don't change, they could lose to Cal. They could lose on the road to SMU. They will lose to Clemson. They could lose at Duke. They will get killed at Miami. They will lose to they could lose to North Carolina. They'll get smashed by Notre Dame, and they could lose to Florida, as bad as Florida's been. The only game that I look at and say that's the game where I know they're going to win that game is Charleston Southern. That's it if they keep playing the way that they are now. So this goes way beyond they lost some good players, way beyond that. And if they don't get it fixed, they're going to have some major problems. So I would like to pick Cal in this game because I wouldn't necessarily be opposed to Florida State kind of losing again because I just, I'll be honest, I kind of enjoy what's happening to Florida State. I actually have always been sort of a Florida State fan, not a fan of like the team. Like, hey, if I left Notre Dame, I'd be a Florida State fan. But I've always rooted for Florida State when they're not playing Notre Dame. I always rooted for them to beat Miami. I always rooted them for them to beat Florida. I grew up really respecting Bobby Bowden a lot in a lot of different ways. Loved Charlie Ward when I was a kid, just fun to watch him play. Peter Warwick was a guy that played receiver during the era where I was in high school and college and, a guy that I really liked and respected. And so I've always kind of had a bit of a fondness for the Florida State program. But in recent years, I've really lost respect for that institution just because of the way that they've handled trying to get out of the ACC. It's been petty. It's been childish. It's been like, who are you to act like you guys are so much better than this league? When was the last time you won the league? It's been like a decade since you've won the league. And so I just they've kind of lost me as a someone who kind of held that program in high regard. And now I kind of am enjoying watching them get their butts kicked, to be honest with you. They needed to eat some humble pie, and they're doing that a little bit. Super chat from Iden Banami. Thank you, Iden. What's for breakfast or lunch tomorrow with Ange? Thank you for the mailbag. So I don't know what we'll do for breakfast or lunch. We'll eat whatever's at the stadium most likely because we'll leave the house probably around noon to start heading over to the stadium and probably just have something there. They have chili there that's really good. They got rid of it for part of last year and then they brought it back late. I'm so happy that they did. And I was concerned that they were not going to have it this year, but they had it at the first home game, and it's a really good chili. I'm not a big fan of chili with big chunks of tomatoes, and so it has big chunks of tomatoes, but it's easy to pick them out, and it's really good. So I'll probably have that with a little bit of cheese. I like to put so when I have chili, I used to put crackers in chili. I don't do that anymore. But I'll put some cheese. They put some shredded cheddar cheese there, and I'll put that in there, let it melt, and then have that for lunch. But for breakfast, we'll probably just have eggs and bacon, probably for breakfast tomorrow. So yeah, I'm gonna try and see if I can convince her to make it, or at least I'll make the bacon. She can make the eggs. She makes scrambled eggs better than me. I'm a pretty good cook, and you guys know I like to cook, but I'm just not good at making scrambled eggs. I can't get them to be scrambled. They end up turning into like I'll scramble them, and then they'll end up turning into like kind of chunks, bigger chunks. I can't get them to scramble them the way that Angela does and the way that my mom does. I can't figure it out. I've tried it. They're like, no, you got to do this, and then I do that, and it doesn't work. So I just don't. I don't think I have the patience to be good at scrambled eggs. So the flavor's good, but it's not really a scrambled egg. It's more of like I don't know what I would call it. So we'll probably have that tomorrow. So thank you. Thanks for the super chat, man. Got a super chat from Lucky Ducks 49512. Thank you for the super chat. A player on both sides of the ball who has surprised so far, and a player you hope will pick up their play going forward. So a player that has surprised so far, and I'm taking your surprise as a good thing, like a good surprise. Player on offense that has been a good surprise so far. Well, unfortunately, I don't know that there's a lot of those. I will say that Sam Emil Wagner's been a little bit more steady than I thought he would be. That's a little bit of a surprise. I thought he would be a little bit more flashy with some bad snaps, which is kind of what you expect from a guy who's a little light and who's a first-year starter. But he's been steady so far, so that's been good to see. Jeremiah Love, Jadarian Price, we talked about all season as being breakout players. I don't know that there's a lot of guys that are surprising me in a good way so far this season on offense, to be honest with you. My guy that I hope will pick up their play going forward on offense is obvious. It's Riley Leonard. You hope that Riley Leonard can get back. I said it before. If he can just be the guy he was at Duke, Notre Dame's going to be a really, really good offense this year. But he hasn't been that guy. The closest we've seen to that was against Purdue. But if you watch if you're on the board, go to boards.oursbreakdown.com. If you're a premium member, I've got two different pass game breakdowns that I did. One I put up yesterday, the other one I put up this morning. And the one yesterday talked about how they used motions and shifts and different things like that to really get the offense going. And then I showed a couple missed opportunities and plays where there were plays to be had, but Riley's just got to stick with the read longer, and he's not sticking with the read. He's got to do some things to give guys chances to make plays. I think that's carryover from Duke, where he's not willing to kind of throw that one-on-one and let his guy go make a play because he didn't really have guys that could do that at Duke, and he's going to have to learn to do that. And then we saw, later in the game, Steve Angeli did that, and it's like I break down the two plays. I'm like, look, it's kind of the same thing. You've got to throw that ball out there and give that guy a chance. So that part I understand, but some of the stuff where he's just not sticking to his reads and not reading the defense, and like there was an over concept to Jaden Harrison that goes for a touchdown if he reads it properly. I've seen him literally read that play and make that play at Duke. He's just not comfortable doing it. So if he can get comfortable doing it, he can get back to being the guy he was at Duke. He's certainly the runner he was at Duke. But they need him to be at the minimum the passer he was at Duke, and right now he's not. And so if they're going to beat Louisville, and if they're going to beat USC and beat Georgia Tech, and if Florida State figures it out, beat Florida State, and then get to the postseason and do some damage in the postseason, they're going to need him to they can't just repeat. I said it the other day. If they play the way they did against Purdue, I don't know that anyone on the schedule between now and USC can beat Notre Dame. I don't know if they can. But I also don't think that's good enough to then go beat Georgia, Bama, Ohio State, Texas, teams like that in the playoff. I don't, and that's ultimately the goal. So he's going to have to get better. Defensively, who's been a surprise so far, like the biggest surprise so far? I'll tell you, it's Adon Schuler. Like, I thought Adon could be this player that he is right now of what he's been so far. Not shocked at all that Adon could be that kind of player. I mean, we talked a lot about him when they signed him through that whole process, that we liked him. He's not an elite athlete, but he's smart. He's physical. It's just he's probably a year ahead of where I thought he would be. Like, I thought that what we've seen from Adon so far is what we would see in 2025 from him as a junior. So it's not that I'm surprised that Adon is doing what he's doing. He's just doing what he's doing a lot faster than I thought he was going to do it. That's really been the big surprise for me. Like, I'm not surprised that Jason Onye is really good. We had him as a breakout player predictor. We predicted him as a breakout player this season. I'm not surprised by the good things we've seen from either linebackers like Jaden Osbury making plays. That doesn't shock me at all. I mean, you guys know my thoughts on Jaden Osbury. The surprises, unfortunately, for Notre Dame so far this season, to be honest with you, have been guys that aren't playing as well as we thought they would play. And that's been like Riley Leonard, Riley Mills, Howard Cross. Those guys have been disappointments so far. And hopefully they're going to be able to get going. And that gets to my question about, player who has to pick up their play going forward. Notre Dame can't be the defense that they want to be if the two defensive tackles don't play better. Howard Cross is at least making some plays. Riley Mills has yet to make a play. Well, I shouldn't say that. I mean, he forced the interception by Boubacar. Riley had the pressure on that. He's the hit the quarterback and knock the ball. He made a play there. He hasn't made. I don't want to be hyperbolic and say he hasn't made a play all year. He made a really good stop, or he blew a guard up and drove him into the backfield, and then Burnham makes tackle for loss. So he's made a couple plays, but it's been very few and far between. And it's not that Riley's not playing well relative to my expectations. He's just not playing well, period. And he's going to have to play well, period. They're going to need him to play well moving forward if this thing is going to get figured out. And we'll see. We'll see. And he doesn't need to get benched, and Howard doesn't need to get benched right now. They just need to play better. You're not going to be who you are by putting somebody else in the game. You're only going to be who you are by getting them going and getting them playing to their ability. It's not just put Jason Onye in the game. No, if you want to get to the way that you need to be, you need Jason Onye to keep doing what he's doing, but you also need Riley Mills to come in and do what he does and what he's capable of. Same thing with Howard Cross. So they're going to have to figure that out. They're going to have to get those guys rolling. And those are the guys to me that need to really step up, in my opinion, and improve their games moving forward. Good super chat. Appreciate that. AST12321 with a super chat. Thank you very much. If you could choose to go back and beat Northern Illinois by 1 in exchange for being Florida State's first win, would you? No, not at all. No, I would much rather lose to a really good Northern Illinois team than to a bad Florida State team. That's number one. Number two, if you're going to have a loss, have it on September 7th, not November 9th. There's no way I want that to be something that you would change. No way. Wouldn't even remotely consider that. No, Northern Illinois is better than at least 4 or 5 teams on Notre Dame's schedule, at least. And the way Florida State's playing right now, they're better than Florida State. So I would, and again, the timing of it is huge as well. Like if they played Florida State on September 7th and beat them, or lost to them, and then, beat Northern Illinois in November, okay, that would make me think more through it because of the timing. So the timing alone makes me say no to that. But again, I wouldn't ever want to lose to a bad team. And Northern Illinois is not a team that had any business beating Notre Dame, but they're not a bad team. It's like Marshall. And we had this conversation in 2022, and some people didn't quite understand what we were saying, look, guys, this is a good football team. Marshall's got a good football team. Like, you lost to a good football team. And then someone says, well, you're making excuses. No, I'm not making any excuses. That was a horrible loss. Notre Dame had no business losing to Marshall. They had no business losing to Northern Illinois. But it doesn't change the fact that I can say that and still acknowledge that's a good football team. That's a well-coached football team. They earned that win. And I would argue that Northern Illinois earned the win more than Marshall did. Because against Marshall, you had some just bad plays from Notre Dame. I mean, if Tyler Buckner doesn't miss a wide open Braden Lindsey on a go route late in the first half, that game's over. If Notre Dame doesn't have dumb mistakes on defense late in the game, they win that game. I think Northern Illinois outplayed Notre Dame much more so than Marshall did, which honestly kind of bothered me, is what bothered me. It's like, man, you got whooped. It wasn't like bad breaks, missed this play, missed it. You just got whooped. And I would still much rather deal with that than a November 9th win to an 0-9, 0-8 at that time, Florida State team. That'd be horrible. Absolutely horrible. Just to give you guys a little heads up, just to prepare you. So my voice is a little shot today. And There are just going to be some times where I've just going to kind of have to go quiet for several minutes and drink some of this because just in order to save my voice. Otherwise, I won't be able to go longer and get to all the questions, which I'd really like to get to. So just to give you guys a heads up, I apologize in advance for that. That I'm just going to have to take a couple pauses during the show just to kind of let my voice recover because I can feel when it's about to go, and so I just I'm not making excuses. Hey, I'm staying here, Ray. I'm staying here. I'm doing the show. I'm just letting you guys know. In order to do that, I got to do some of these things sometimes. So, um, yeah. So I just wanted to give you a heads up. All right. So we got to all the super chat, so we can get back to the top. And here we go with BK's last brain cell. Who has graded out the best on the O line in your opinion? And has it been any other O lineman close? Well, for me, the guy that's graded out best so far was Billy Schrouth prior to his injury. And then Emil Wagner was next. Billy graded out. Emil's a little bit more consistent than Billy was. Billy had more flashy plays than Emil had. He had more dominant plays than Emil had. I had Ashton Craig was third, even though the 2 penalties really bothered me. Sam Pendleton was fourth, and Anthony Knapp was fifth. The ironic thing is I have Sam Pendleton fourth, and Sam has had some issues, in his tenure where he's had some bad pass pro snaps and he's missed some guys in the run game. But the thing about Anthony and Sam, but especially Sam, is you could argue that if you looked at the 10 best blocks of the season, just the 10 best individual, like, wow, that guy had a good block, I'd be willing to argue at least half of them were Sam. Like if you looked at the offensive line as a whole and said, these are the 10 best blocks for any Notre Dame offensive lineman so far this season, I would seriously, and I'm not even being hyperbolic, I'm just thinking off the top of my head. I'd have to go back and look at this, but I'd be willing to bet that at least half of them were blocks made by Sam Pendleton. But that's great, and that's why he's in there. But the reason he grades out lower is because really inconsistent performance, and he's going to have to get better, and he needs to improve in that regard in order to grade out higher. Now, the reason, and this is what I've always said, I will live with that from a guy like Sam Pendleton. I will live with the inconsistency this early because whenever he gets in, this is going to be an issue. Whether you wait until next year or senior year, early on, as he gets his feet wet, there's going to be some ups and downs. But you live with it because when he's good, it's really, really good. And somebody in the chat, Stephen B, said that Sam Pendleton made that explosive run play against A&M happen. Stephen, I would argue he had 3 blocks in that game that sprung guys free. I believe he had a key block on both of Jadarian Price's long runs. One of them came back, and I'm pretty sure he had a great block on the touchdown run from Jeremiah Love as well. So Sam's had a lot of those kind of blocks so far this season. He just now needs to clean up some of the other snaps. And as he, so like the high-level plays are here, and as he kind of gets those, the low-level plays become less and less, then his game's really going to take off. I mean, he's done some really good things. Anthony Knapp, on the other hand, it has been really wildly inconsistent, and it's been one way. He's, all young linemen are going to have misses in the run game. He's actually graded out pretty well in the run game. He's been, I would argue, their least effective pass blocker so far this season, and that's not good when it's your left tackle. He's going to have to get a lot better there. And, but so that's how I'd rank them so far is I would rank them Billy, Emil, Ashton, Sam, and Anthony Knapp is how I'd rank the 5 offensive linemen. All right. And there's the comment down there from Stephen B. Anthony Knapp can't go 3 inches. I don't care if Anthony Knapp's plenty tall enough to play left tackle. Anthony Knapp is plenty long enough to play left tackle. I mean, Georgia had a left tackle when they beat Notre Dame in 2017, who I think was a first-round draft pick and played. Somebody can correct me if I'm wrong. They played tackle in the NFL, and I'm trying to remember what the kid's name was. Give me a second. I'm going to find it here real quick. He was a left tackle. He got drafted by the New England Patriots in 2018, I believe. Isaiah Wynn. And he was a guy that was 6'2" left tackle in college, and people thought he'd play guard in the NFL, and he stayed at tackle for at least a while. I haven't watched him in a little bit, but he certainly stayed there for a while. and he was 6'2", but he had really long arms and he was nimble and athletic. Anthony's got those traits to play left tackle. The problem is Anthony's got two issues when it comes to playing left tackle. One is he's light. And I know he's got a lot of good upper body weight room strength, but he doesn't have the lower body strength yet to play that position. And then the second thing is not so much it's not so much a negative. I don't know that he has the demeanor to play left tackle. And that's not a criticism, because it's in the similar fashion that I argued that I didn't think Quentin Nelson had the demeanor to play tackle in college. Quentin Nelson physically could have been a dominant tackle in college. He could have handled pass pro in college. Now, he's not a tackle in the NFL, but in college, he could have been a very dominant tackle. But he had the demeanor of an interior player. He wanted to come off the line and destroy you. And that's more, in my opinion, more of an interior type of demeanor. And Anthony, to me, has some of that. And that's partly why I think moving inside down the road would be ideal for him, because that demeanor benefits him more inside than it does a tackle. And so it's not so much the height or the length that's the problem. It's the lack of girth and it's the demeanor. But he's going to have to kind of clean that up, because right now he's their left tackle. And until that changes, he's gonna need to show a little bit more patience, show the ability to anchor a little bit better in the pass in pass pro, because they're going to need that part of the game to improve. Certainly going to need that. And yeah, I'm not going to say that because I don't want to make it sound like I'm making excuses for the quarterback, but he's going to have to get better. No doubt about it. Aiden Benami, has there been a different interior defensive line scheme this season, or the same scheme, just lack of effort, productivity? I don't want to say lack of effort, but it's more about they're just not playing well. They're just not getting off blocks. I don't know that I could chalk it up to scheme per se, because they're not doing a whole lot of things different. But it really comes down to this from the standpoint of they're just not. Everything is deliberate. There's nothing that's aggressive with the veterans. It's just all kind of stagnant, and even the twists and stunts are just kind of slow developing, and there's no rhythm to it, and then there's just no aggressiveness. There's no block destruction really happening with the kind of consistency we saw last season, especially from Howard. So they're just it's really just about effort, and I don't mean effort from the standpoint of like, oh, they're soft. It's just a hunger. They're not playing with any fire. I don't even know if effort's not the right word. They're not playing with a lot of fire, and hopefully that can kind of get figured out. And like I said, this isn't new. We kind of saw this a little bit last year from Howard Cross. He was more effective last year than he was this year. There's no doubt about that. But he didn't. I mean, I thought he was pretty good against Tennessee State. He didn't have any sacks or tackles for loss. He didn't get his first tackle, but you saw early in the season some production from him that we're just not seeing so far from him this season. And maybe it's the hamstring. I mean, it could be a lot of different things, but he's just really not playing good football right now. And they're gonna have to figure out why and get it fixed, because it's been very disappointing from them so far this season. And they're gonna have to find some answers. There's no doubt about that. Got a super chat from Beezer12 Washing Beard, who has recently signed up for the message board, by the way. So I appreciate that. Great shows this week, as always. Have you had a chance to create a playbook on CFB 25? We'd love to have Notre Dame run Coach D's game plan. I actually do have a playbook on CFB 2025. I actually have not played that game since the season started. For just no time to play it. But yeah, I did. It's funny. Vince and I were talking after, because we went and bought our PS5s together, and then we ordered the game together before it came out. And he was talking about, we were just kind of on the phone talking about our teams, and he's like, have you played? He was, how many games have you played yet? And I was like, I haven't played any games yet. He goes, what do you mean? He's like, you told me you've been playing the whole time. I said, yeah, I'm on the game. I'm not playing yet, because I was going through and making my playbook. And yeah, so so I was that guy. And my wife just kind of looked at me and just was like, are you serious? She's like, how many plays do you have to make? And I can't remember. I think I had like 300, something like that. And she's like, are you serious? And I was like, yeah, my wife's opinion of me just went down a little bit. So, but yeah, I do have a playbook on there. All right. I also made an IB uniforms on there, and Vince actually played with him at one point in time. It was pretty funny, but I thought they looked sharp. Looked a little bit too much like the Seahawks, though. I couldn't get the green right. They only had like this fluorescent green, which I was not happy about, like on the uniform. But it is what it is. Aiden Regan through 3 weeks. Is Jeremiah Love being the number one back? Where would you rank him among the running backs we've had in the last 10 years? I mean, it's way too early for that, right? Like it's good that he's played well so far, but it's so hard to rank a guy that's played 3 games and isn't even averaging 100 yards per game. As good as he's been, isn't even averaging 100 yards per game, and then compare him to to what guys did in past seasons. I mean, let's not forget last year through 3 games. Audric Estime already had 2 100-yard games, and he had a game where he averaged 8.9 yards per carry against Tennessee State and then 9.6 yards per carry against NC State last season. So, through 3 games last year, Audric was averaging, 43 carries. He was averaging 8.0 yards per carry, which is higher than what Jeremiah Love is doing. So, look, it's different circumstances, different offense, different offensive line. But let's let him kind of get through the season a little bit before we kind of start comparing him to guys that had 1,300 yards like Audric did last year, guys that had back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons like Kyron had, or a guy that had a 1,400-yard season like Josh Adams, or just the dynamic season that Dexter Williams had in 2018. I mean, in 2018, let's not forget when Dexter was unofficially suspended for the first 4 games. His first game back, he went for 161 on national TV against Stanford, and the next week he went for 178 and had a 97-yard touchdown run on the road against Virginia Tech. And that same year also went for over 200 against Florida State. So let's see Jeremiah. Let's just take a break, enjoy what we're seeing, let him develop, and then as he puts together a whole season, then we can compare him to other backs. Because right now, as well as the kid is playing, he's doing some great things. He's still, like I said, he's had 1 100-yard game in 3 games. Now, that's not his fault, right? I mean, he should have had over 100 yards against Northern Illinois, but let's let the season develop a little bit, and let's let him continue this improvement and grow and develop. I will say this, however, because I don't want to completely dismiss your question. I would absolutely love to see if he continues and develops the way I think he will. Then this conversation, let's say if we have this after, like Aiden, I would love it if you brought this question back for the mailbag after the USC game, and then say, hey, let's compare it now, a full season now, to what we've seen, and I think it's going to stack up very well, very well. I just want to see it continue over a period of time, because look, I could go back and find stretches of Tony Jones Jr. having more production than what Jeremiah has had so far. I mean, you go back and look at 2019 and how a stretch that Tony Jones Jr. had, a 3-game stretch against Virginia, Bowling Green, and USC. He had 131 yards against Virginia. He had 102 yards on only 7 carries against Bowling Green, and he had 176 yards against USC. He had 409 yards in 3 games and averaged 8.2 yards per carry. Right? I mean, again, that's better than what we've seen from Jeremiah. So again, let's let it but then he got hurt and he couldn't continue the season. So let's let the kid get through the whole season. I think he's going to continue doing what he's doing, but let's evaluate it then, and I'll have a much better feel. So Aiden, hang on to this question. Bring this baby back in November, the week after we do, because what we might do is we may do like a mailbag earlier that week since the season's over with, and just kind of get into that stuff. But the mailbag after the regular season is over, I would love to be able to look back at this question and compare what he's done so far. All right, great question so far, everybody. This has been an elite show because you guys are bringing elite questions, and I appreciate it. John A1, Jaden Thomas got to run a reverse versus Purdue. Denbrock has called pop passes to Harrison and Love, but why not use Mitchell or Smith for reverses instead of Thomas? Has Thomas shown more capability as a playmaker with the ball in his hands in practice, or was it a tendency breaking type of thing? I think it's that, John. I think that's where it comes down to. What's the one guy that you're not expecting to run a reverse? It's Jaden Thomas. And I'll tell you this, I'm more comfortable with that reverse than I was when they used to call jet sweeps to Jaden Thomas. Remember that? And I think that to me is like that's more of a playmaker type of thing. This is where you're just trying to catch somebody, to be honest with you. I think it's more of that than it is, hey, we're in a because I believe let me go find the play because I believe they were in a 12 personnel look on that particular play, but I could be wrong. Let me just pull up the old all 22 here real quick and find that particular play because I do believe that they were that what I just said was correct. And so in that 12 personnel alignment, you would have seen Notre Dame you would have seen Notre Dame or seen Purdue play them a little bit differently. So I think part of it was just trying to catch them a little bit. So just give me a sec here. It looks like they haven't uploaded that. There we go. Notre Dame offense versus Purdue. Let me find that -2. But that's kind of what I'm thinking, John, on that particular play. Did he gain 2 or it was a -2 yard gain, right? Let me find that here real quick. Okay, let me go to my play sheet and see where that play was. And then that'll help me find it a little bit because I'm trying to find it here. It was definitely in the first half, right? So it would have been before it was the second quarter. So was it a 2-yard gain or I thought it was a -2? Was it a +2? Give me a second. All right, here's the game sheet. Let me go find the reverse to Jaden Thomas. All right, so it was play 31. There it is. Okay. So they were in on that play. They were in, yeah, I was right. They were in 12 personnel. So you had 2 tight ends on the field. So it was a thing where that was your 10 all game. You had him there. And I'll be honest with you, if you go back and watch that play, if Ashton Craig blocks somebody on that play, Jaden might have something. I mean, Ashton Craig ran right by that guy. I'm actually going to take a little screenshot of this and kind of show you guys what that play might have looked like if he would have blocked somebody because he might have had something because Purdue played that sucker. They overplayed that sucker big time. So let me pull this play up here real quick, and I'm going to show you guys this particular play. It's not going to be drawing on it because I literally just took the screenshot. But let me pull up this play real fast, and you guys are going to see what I'm talking about here. So if you look at this play, if Ashton Craig blocks this dude, that sucker might go. Here we go. Give me a second. Like, look at this particular play. I'm going to bring your question down so that way people can see it. But, John, look at this. If Ashton Craig doesn't run right by that dude right there, you guys see that? If he doesn't run right by that guy, look at all this room, and he's got a lead blocker. Like, he might have been able to do something with that play. So, again, even though I would have loved to seen it with Jaden Harrison and, or Jeremiah Love or somebody like that, boy, I got to tell you what, even with Jaden Thomas running it, if Ashton Craig doesn't whiff on that block, and this guy right here ends up making the tackle. If Ashton Craig blocks him like he's supposed to, I mean, look, you got Eli Raridan and Jaden Thomas, and it's going to be Jaden Thomas in space against one of these two guys, and they had been having some pretty good success making those guys miss throughout the game. So I think it was a tendency breaker, John. I do. I think it's also like, look, this is where you're at. You're in 12 personnel. This is your 12 personnel alignment. You go to 12 personnel, and all of a sudden you've got Jaden Harrison on the field. That may say, hey, listen, number 2, be alert for number 2 because they've seen you do that a lot with him so far this season. So that's what I would do. So yeah, but you'd like to see some of those guys get the ball, but I understood why they did. And Jaden Thomas isn't fast, but he's a good athlete. He's just not fast. Muhammad Abdi with a question. Brian, do you worry Freeman's conservative nature will always be susceptible to lesser teams as it leads to smaller margin of error? As coaches say, 2 most important stats that leads to wins, turnover margin. I do. But I don't think it's just reserved for those games. I mean, we saw it against Ohio State a little bit last year as well. We saw it a little bit against Clemson early last year as well. This isn't just reserved for – I mean, there's been some big games where Notre Dame comes out in big games and they're ready to play emotionally and physically, but the game plan is still a little bit too conservative. And I would just like to see Coach Freeman just say, listen, you hired an OC that you trust, stay out of it. Let him run the offense. That's not your – I mean, he says he's literally said this in interviews. I'm not a quarterback guru and I'm not an offensive line expert. And it's like, well, yeah, exactly. You're not. You're a defensive guy and you're great at that. And I think you've got a great vision for the football team as a head coach. I think you have a great vision for the offense. But when it comes to offering up personnel packages and making suggestions about this or that or the other thing, be limited with that stuff, because there's always value to a defensive coach saying, hey, listen, they're doing this. I think you guys can do this. But that should be more about big play opportunities, not regular old, let's just run with this personnel package, or let's go with this play, or you know, let's pump the brakes on this or slow down this, that type of thing. It's like, let them roll. And I would certainly like to see more of that. But you hired a coach to do a job. Let him do a job. And I think eventually, I hope that Marcus Freeman figures out that it's okay to turn your offense loose. Like Ryan was talking about this yesterday. Like, his view of complementary football is we're going to be great on defense and we want the offense to complement the defense. And my thing is, like, complementary football is not that. It's not, okay, we're going to be great here, but let's just not get ourselves beat over here. Like, Lincoln Riley had that view of the defense, and that's what hurt him at USC with the defense, was like, look, we just need a defense that complements us and can make a couple stops. And that got you beat a lot, especially in big games. And Lincoln Riley didn't win a whole lot of big games out of conference during his tenure. And that was true at Oklahoma as well. So complementary football means we're going to be really good on both sides of the ball. And at times in games, we may say, listen, we need you guys to do this because we're kind of worn out or we got to make some changes. That's fine. But complementary football means we're great here. We need to make sure that we're great over here. That's how you win titles. And that's what Kirby Smart recognized that too. It took Kirby a couple years to recognize that. It did. And then he went out and hired Todd Monken and said, okay, go run your offense. And we saw Georgia go from being a very dull, stagnant offense prior to Todd Monken's arrival. Because what was Todd Monken's first year? Let me go look that up, because I know he was not there in 2017. Where he was at Georgia. I think his first year at Georgia was 2020, right? So Notre Dame didn't face him the first 2 years. And the year before he got there, they averaged 30.8 points per game. It jumped up to 32.3 during the COVID year. Then it jumped up to 38.6 and then 41.1. And you look at the total offense the year before he got there, they averaged 408.1 yards per play or per game and 6.1 yards per play. In 2021, they jumped up to 442.9 and 7 yards a play in 2021. And then in 2022, they jumped up to 501 yards per game and 7.2 yards per play. And guess what Georgia also had those years? Great defenses. Georgia getting really good and really explosive on offense took nothing away from the Georgia defense. Nothing. And in fact, in 2021, when the offense had its first breakout season, the defense of Georgia actually went from 12.6 and 19 and 20 points in the COVID year down to 10.2 the first year they won the title. And they jumped up to 14.3 the next year. And you know, it didn't take anything away from their defense. And Coach Freeman needs to understand that as well. And if he does, then he's going to win a lot here. He's going to win a lot here. And there's a difference between being aggressive and explosive and being risk-taking. Those two things don't always go together. Or being unsound. You can be a team that runs the football. You can be a team that believes in winning in the trenches and still be a high-octane, score points, explosive offense that also values efficiency. And way too many defensive coordinators think that you can't be that and still score a lot of points. You can. And way too many defensive coordinators focus on, hey, we need you to be more of a time of possession team and not so much on a score quick team because of how it affects us as a defense. Well, that's fine. But you know what else affects you as a defense? Us scoring a lot of points, because it makes your job a lot easier. And with the type of like athletes that Notre Dame has on defense from a depth standpoint, you're better positioned now to handle an offense that scores a little quicker, because you got waves of players you can throw people, and you know, take advantage of that. And hopefully Coach Freeman eventually figures that out and just completely turns it loose. Muhammad Abdi also asks, explosive plays are lacking. Let's go. I'm not sure. I kind of messed that up by not bringing that up in the first time, Muhammad. I apologize. BK's last brain cell would rather see Urlacher out there than Hurd. Losing Patelho by far was the worst loss to Purdue. Armel is a big boy. So these are some observations. Would rather see Kennedy Urlacher out there than Hurd. I mean, it's one game, but he certainly looked a lot better in the one game. So yeah, well, I mean, I'm not saying to do that because I don't think we should ever make those type of decisions off of one game. But it's one of those things where I would be strongly keeping my eye on what Kennedy does moving forward. I agree with you that losing Patelho was the worst of those losses. There's no doubt about that. And yes, Armel is a big boy. He was okay against Purdue. I want to see Armel move his feet a little bit more. He kind of hits and sticks. I want to see him move his feet a little bit more. Hulk strongest. Hey, Brian, what are your impressions of SC and LSU after 3 weeks? Well, SC we've only seen twice. I thought they looked really good in both games. I thought LSU at USC was a really good football game, and I thought USC's defense looked really good. I was not as impressed with what Lincoln Riley was doing in the second half. I thought there's honestly, I kind of thought USC was going to give that game away in the fourth quarter. I had a buddy of mine text me that during the fourth quarter. He was like, dude, they're trying to give them this game away. And I'm like, I was thinking the same exact thing. But they came out against Utah State in the second game and smashed them, beat them pretty convincingly. But we really don't know what USC is just yet. We'll learn a little bit more about them this weekend. But so far, they've been what I thought they would be, an offense that's geared more around spreading the ball around. I talked about this yesterday in our breakdown with Bill. But I mean, I kind of expected this from USC. I didn't, but I don't know how good some of those wins are yet. I have not been impressed with LSU. LSU's 2-1. They got out coached and outplayed by USC in the second half of that game. And then they went out and really kind of struggled against Nicholls State. Honestly, that was just a game where they just had better players than Nicholls State. I mean, they only rushed for 68 yards in that game. I mean, that's gave up 100. They gave up 150 yards in that game to Nicholls State. They gave up. Nicholls State had 382 yards of offense and 6.5 yards per play. And actually, that was what LSU did in that game. They gave up 4.9 yards per play, 295 yards, 150 rushing. South Carolina had 6.5 yards per play, 398 yards. And I'm going to tell you right now, South Carolina would have won that game if Lenore Sellers doesn't get hurt. I wholeheartedly believe that. They got outplayed that game. They just had some better athletes in spots. And so I've not been overly impressed with LSU. However, it is still early, and they are learning a new defense. And there's definitely been some changes on offense as well. And we'll find out if those work. And they've got a lot of guys stepping into new roles. So even though LSU has not looked good to me so far, it doesn't mean that that's going to be who they are. I expect them this next game to beat UCLA. Next week's game against South Alabama just got a little bit more interesting. Not that I expect LSU to lose. They're not going to lose. But that South Alabama offense has been scoring points. They lost to Ohio 27-20. But their first game they lost to North Texas, they still scored 38 points and had 582 yards of offense. They beat FCS Northwestern State 87-10, had 620 yards. And then last night, they destroyed Appalachian State at App State. They went for 472 yards and 7.0 yards per play. They've run for over 300 yards each of their last two games. And I think that's definitely a vulnerability for LSU. So it'll actually be in my opinion, a good test for LSU, because even though it's a team that you should still be able to beat them, but they're going to do some things to you schematically, and they're going to do some things with personnel that will allow you to get a good look at them. And this is the same South Alabama team that beat Oklahoma State last year 33-7 at Oklahoma State. So I think it's a really good test for LSU's defense before the bye, getting ready for their SEC schedule, to play a team like that can run the ball and is going to do some things schematically with some gimmicky type of stuff that can give you problems. And you get to test yourself a little bit and say, okay, how much improvement have we made since the South Carolina game? Because honestly, I don't think the UCLA game is going to be a test. I don't. I think LSU is going to destroy at UCLA. And they're not a very good football team. They're not talented. Their scheme is very dull. They should just overwhelm UCLA. I don't know what you're going to learn about LSU from that game. South Alabama game, I think you can learn something about the LSU defense if they've gotten any better at all, or if South Alabama moves the ball and scores a lot on them. Even though I expect LSU to win, it's still going to say, okay, you got some holes that you got to work out during this bye week before Ole Miss comes to town. So I actually think that's a good placement for that game, to be honest with you. And we'll see what they can do and how they can develop, because they were fortunate and blessed to come out of that South Carolina game. But you know what? That's how it works sometimes. Sometimes you get outplayed, but you make enough plays to go win the game, or you catch a break, guy gets hurt, whatever, and you win the game. That's part of football. And they got the win, and now they're 2-1, and they should win their next couple before play Ole Miss. So it's going to be very interesting to see. Very interesting to see. All right. 87 points was against a really bad football team, though. A really bad football team. There has been plenty of games where Notre Dame could have scored 80 if they wanted to, and they didn't, because there's no point in that, in my opinion. Northwestern State was a team that last year went 0-6. They had 5 games canceled. Why did they? They had a death. Oh, that's right. They had a player shot. That's right. But they canceled their season because a player there got shot and killed. But they were 0-6, and they were not very good. They lost to Eastern Illinois, lost by 2 touchdowns to Lamar, 2 touchdowns to Southeastern Louisiana. They got beat by 30 by Louisiana Tech. 2022, they were 4-7. Got beat 64-10 by Southern Miss, 47-0 by Montana. They're not a very good football team. Lost 66-7 to Incarnate Word. So, yeah, Northwestern State's not a very good football team. And they're 0-3 so far this year. They lost to Prairie View A&M, and Tulsa beat them 68-28. So, yeah, and Prairie View A&M's really awful as well. So, they're not a very good football team. Next question from Doug Nimke. I would like to talk about telling the ACC in Miami because Miami canceled the 2024 game. Notre Dame is requiring Miami to come to South Bend in 2025, or Notre Dame will cancel. Are you saying that's what Notre Dame has done, Doug? Or are you saying that's what Notre Dame should do? I'm curious about that. So let me look at the Notre Dame 2025 football schedule. I do not have that memorized. So next year, Notre Dame has to play at Miami. They have 3, 4, 5, 6. Notre Dame already has 7 home games. So are you saying that Notre Dame is doing that, or are you saying Notre Dame should do that? And if you're saying they should do that, I honestly, I don't know that you'll have 8 home games. I don't know how that's going to work, but I would consider doing that, honestly, because I still think it is a bad look the way that they canceled that game. Because now Miami basically gets a couple extra years to build their program before they've got to come to Notre Dame, knowing that they get Notre Dame at their place next year. So, yeah, I'm with you on that. I would try to play some kind of hardball. Maybe what they should do, Doug, is even if you're not going to get them to come to your place, make it a neutral field game. You know, maybe play a little hardball with them in that regard. That could be something that they do as well. Hey, just a real quick heads up to everybody. We're getting storms here right now. And since this is a solo show, if I lose my connection, the show's kind of over. So hopefully it won't. In fact, we haven't had any light flashes or anything like that, but you just never know in this area. Sometimes when we get storms, we lose our internet will go out. So hopefully that doesn't happen, but just to give you guys a heads up in case that it does. Matt M. Brian, do you believe what you have seen so far, Riley Leonard, a day 2 drafted quarterback, or more of a Sam Hartman day 3 practice squad guy, showing how the NFL loves physical traits? I mean, I'm not a draft guy, so I can't tell you what the NFL is going to see. But if I can just tell you what I see, if I'm an NFL team, I'm not seeing a guy that I would draft right now, because yes, he's a really good runner. But the thing he's never been a guy with great arm talent. Like, he didn't have a big arm. He's got a good arm. It's not a great arm. He's a playmaker. But what I'm seeing on film right now is a guy that struggles to read defenses. And that to me trumps a lot of different things. And he doesn't have the big arm that NFL teams have fallen in love with that masks that. And so right now, I would see him more on draft day in the Sam Hartman mold than I would a guy that could be a day 2 draft pick based on what we've seen so far. Because what you've said is what you've seen so far. And that's what I've seen so far. Now, I think Riley can get better. And if he improves in that regard, they'll give him a pass for some of that. Hey, new system, new teammates, you missed all spring, et cetera, et cetera. But at some point in time, the level of play has to improve and improve dramatically if you're going to kind of boost your draft stock in that regard. Mark Avalone, how do you think Joe Alt is feeling prepping to go against TJ Watt this weekend? Well, if Joe Alt's the competitor that I think Joe Alt is, he's probably excited about it. I mean, when you're an elite talent, you want those challenges. You want to go against the best. You want to be challenged by the best player so you can sit there and say, hey, listen, this is where my game is at. I'm a great player too. Or you know what? TJ Watt taught me some things and I'm going to have to go improve my game. So if Joe's the competitor that I think he is, he's fired up. He's locked in this week at practice because elite players want that elite challenge. I mean, Michael Jordan was at his best when he played against Bird and the Celtics and the Pistons and the Lakers because you want Dominique. I mean, Dominique and Jordan had some great battles. Dominique and Bird had some great battles. Magic and Bird had great battles because great players want to be challenged. They want to go against other great players. And winners certainly want to do that. And so I would imagine Joe's pretty fired up this week. Domer Grizz, happy Friday. In your analysis, why is it taking Riley so long to return to his 2022 form? Is it a system thing, lingering effects of energy, time with receivers, lack of confidence in OL, etc.? I mean, Domer, I think it's a little bit of all of that, right? You kind of answered your own question with the second part of your question. Those things all pile up. It's not one of those things. It's all of those things. And it's up to him to fix it, right? And some of it takes time. Some of it says, hey, coach, I need extra work, man. We need to sit down and practice. We need to stay 15, 20 minutes after practice and work on this. I need to get in the film room and work on this. Hey, receivers, you guys stay with me a little bit extra after on Tuesday and Wednesday, and we're going to get a little bit extra work in. It's up to him to make time to get caught up on those things. But I honestly think it's a little bit of all of that stuff, all of it. Aiden Benami, do you agree with Sean Davis that Riley Leonard was below average at throwing in a little bit of spring and fall camp? I don't know what Sean said. I didn't hear what Sean said, and I don't feel comfortable responding to something that you're telling me what he said because, so I don't want to push back on that. So my answer to my question is not pushing back on what Sean said. I'll just tell you what I saw, and what I saw was not a guy that was below average at throwing in a little bit of spring. And I was actually at all the practices in the spring and fall. So you saw some days where he was off, and we talked about this. And there were days where I thought he threw well. So no, he was not below average. There were some drills where him and Angeli both were not hitting throws during RVA, but overall he was definitely not below average in my opinion. He wasn't lighting the world on fire, but I also said, and Vince also said that in each of those practices, the two guys that threw the ball the best was CJ Card and Kenny Minchie, even when Riley was having a good day. But here's what I saw in fall camp that we need to see from Riley. There was a play in practice where they ran a slot fade and Riley threw a ball and missed it. And Denbrock gave him some correction. The very next time he went out there, he threw that same ball and it was perfect. And so you saw a guy that was bouncing back, learning from his mistakes, taking correction and bouncing back and making a play the next time. That's what Riley's going to have to do is, look, you're going to make mistakes. You're going to have misses. Okay. Get in the film room, see the mistake, rep it out. And then next time you get that chance, make that play. So I broke down a couple plays where he missed reads on Saturday against Purdue. Okay. He needs to get that correction. He needs to see it. He needs to visualize going through that play again. They need to rep things like that this week, those reads. And then this week, make those improvements because at some point in time, he needs to start making those reads. So I can just tell you what I saw. I don't care to get into pushing back on what somebody else says. That's their observation. But it's also not something about agreeing because if I don't agree with that, that doesn't mean that I'm wrong or he's wrong. People can see the same thing and evaluate it differently. And I definitely did not see a guy that was below average throwing in fall camp. John A1, after the first quarter of the season, who are Notre Dame's top 3 linebackers? I would say the guys. See, here's the thing. It's the guy. There's flashy guys and then guys that are doing things that doing their job effectively. And I would say the top 3 linebackers I've seen so far probably are Jaden Ausberry, Kingston, and Drake Bowen. It's probably the top 3 linebackers that we've seen so far. Jack was a lot better in this last game, and hopefully that continues, but he was not very good the first 2 games. So those would be the 3 that I would say so far have been their best linebackers. Muhammad Abdi, Brian, do you think Notre Dame's ceiling is not as high as predicted coming into the season due to lack of an explosive passing game, hence making explosive run game essential for any hope of salvaging the season? I mean, let's pump the brakes a little bit on salvaging the season. Notre Dame is 2-1 in a top 20 football team, so the season doesn't need to be salvaged. This isn't their 0-3 Florida State. Does the pass game need to get better? Yes. A lot of you are focusing on the explosive part, like big plays, and that's fine. Give me some efficiency first, then we can get to the explosive piece. But I still think their ceiling is just as high because the difference between me and I think a lot of people that are asking questions like this is I'm not assuming that Notre Dame after 3 games is a finished product. I'm assuming that Georgia is not going to play the rest of the year the way that they did against Kentucky. I'm going to assume that that's factual, right? I mean, or are we assuming that Notre Dame is the only team in college football that is a finished product after week 3? I mean, is that where we are? You know, I mean, of course not. That's not where we are. And so do they got to get better? Yeah, they got to get better. That's obvious. Everybody knows that. But they need to come out and make improvements in that regard. But they're not a finished product. I'm not as panicked about some of the stuff as some of you are. They got to get better. There's no doubt. If they don't improve, then yes, this becomes a major problem. The ceiling's not as high. If this is who they are the rest of the year, then the ceiling is definitely not high. Definitely not as high as it was. But it's still a very good football team. And we saw that on Saturday. And I mean, because again, I mean, talking about salvaging the season, they've already beaten one of the best teams they're going to play all year on the road by 10. So the Northern Illinois game sucked. It did. The other 2 games were really good. They need to make sure that we don't see that team that we saw. But again, Notre Dame didn't lose to Northern Illinois because the passing game wasn't explosive enough. They lost to Northern Illinois because they had no fire, they had no heart, they played with no passion, and they were clearly unprepared to win in that game. They couldn't run the ball on Northern Illinois outside of 2 plays. They couldn't stop the run against Northern Illinois. They couldn't stop some crucial 3rd downs against Northern Illinois. We're putting all this on one part of the team, and that's what frustrates me, is we're acting like everything else is just going swimmingly, and if the pass game was better, we'd be – yeah, the pass game was better. They'd probably be 3-0 right now. But you know what else? If the run defense was better, they'd probably be 3-0 right now. So those are all aspects to it. All right, we got a couple super chats down here. Got one from John A1. What happened to hating rivals? I hope USC and Scum tie 0-0 in a 2-TO game, all snap fumbles because they suck 10 overtimes and the refs stop it out of boredom. Rooting for a rival due to strength of schedule is weird to me. I understand where you're coming from, John. I would push back and say that I think hating a rival more than you love your team to the point where you can't view a win by that team as good for your team, I would say is kind of weird to me, to be honest with you. So, I mean, this is 2 rivals, right? And which one losing or which one winning benefits Notre Dame the most? USC winning benefits Notre Dame the most. Me saying that and me wanting USC to win and me acknowledging that USC is a better team is not me rooting for a rival. It's me saying USC winning is good for Notre Dame. And it's kind of like this. This isn't like, Michael Jordan, Larry Bird hate to lose more than they hate to win. I mean, that's an expression, but that's not, I mean, I don't think that that's necessarily how it is, but this is also not the same as that. I'm not rooting for USC. I don't think a lot of people are rooting for USC. They hate Michigan even more than they hate USC. And in this particular instance, USC beating Michigan is good for Notre Dame, which means if Notre Dame handles business, that means we got to watch Michigan take an L to USC at home, and then you get a hand out USC an L at the end of the season. That sounds good to me. It's a whole lot better for me than wanting everyone Notre Dame plays to suck, and then we get a complaint at the end of the year that the strength schedule is not very good, and I just don't think that helps the team. But you can still hate your rivals and appreciate them winning is good for you. Beezer 12 Washing Beard. Thank you for the super chat, and thank you for your super chat too, John. I don't remember if I said that or not. Thoughts on Tennessee? Overrated because they haven't played anybody, or actually good? I don't know, but I really do not like their coach. I like Josh Heupel. I don't know why you don't like their coach. I'm curious as to why you don't like their coach. I mean, they're not overrated. They're playing great. Like here's the thing. We hear this all the time, right? Like, well, I haven't played anybody. Oh, okay, I get it. They haven't played anybody. You're absolutely correct. Tennessee has not played anybody, and I can't sit here and argue for NC State being some kind of great team that they played, because I said before the year that NC State's overrated. Okay, but they still won 69-3, 51-10, and 71-0. I don't care who you play. When you're blowing out teams like that, that's impressive. That's really impressive. And when you're putting up the kind of numbers that they're putting up offensively, that's impressive. I don't care who you've played. I mean, they're averaging 639 yards a game and 8.1 yards per play. And defensively, they're only giving up 160.7 yards and 3.1 yards per play. Now, is Tennessee going to go out there the rest of the year and beat every team they play by 64-4? No, they're not. But you can appreciate what they've done so far and still say, hey, listen, they've got more to prove. But I don't view them as overrated. If you're going to go off of what teams have done so far this season, you're going to be hard pressed to find 5 better teams or even 3 better teams that are as dominant as they are against the teams that they've played. And the thing is, NC State is overrated. Was overrated coming into the season. I said that. I said I don't think, but they're still to me a 7-win team. They're still a bowl team. They're 2-1 right now. They're not an impressive 2-1. They'll probably lose this weekend to Clemson. They're kind of who I thought they were, but that's still a bowl team that you went on a neutral field and beat by 41. That's a team that you went out and had you held them to 143 yards of offense, and you had 460 yards of offense on your own. Like, think about that. Like, that is like NC State had 143 yards of offense. Tennessee outgained them on the ground and in the air. They had more yards than NC State had total offense. So, yeah, they played a crap team. If you even want, let's just say that we found out that NC State's going to be 6-6. Okay, you still beat them by 41. You still dominated them. And to me, that's a sign of a good team. That's a sign of a good football team. So, no, they haven't played anybody great, but they're doing they're doing what a top 5 team is supposed to do against those teams. That's what I would say about Tennessee so far. Now, and here's the other thing that you always have to deal with. A team can be a top 5 team for 7 weeks and then go out and get blown out one week. Say, see, I knew they were overrated. No, they were really good. That Saturday, they played like crap. But that doesn't change how good they were these other weeks. It doesn't mean that those things didn't mean anything. You still won those games by 60. And that's kind of how I look at it. That's how I look at it. Let's see here. BK's last brain cell. How bad is Mel Kiper's evaluation of Travis Hunt? That Travis Hunter is the number 2 corner that will be in the draft. That will be draft eligible. I mean, Travis Hunter could end up being the first quote-unquote corner taken in the draft if teams view him as a receiver or a 2-way player. I mean, I don't know what to make of his draft evaluation. I'll just say this about Travis Hunter. I've said this a lot. I think you can go out as a receiver and not necessarily play, just kind of play street ball and be a really good player if you're very athletic and have a feel for the game. And he clearly does. Cornerback is a position where I think you just need a lot more technical proficiency. And Travis Hunter, to me, does not have that. He's a very talented player, no doubt. But he's a very talented player that's given up 11 receptions already this year. I mean, he's a good football player. He's an elite football player, but he's not a great corner. And that's all I can say. I don't know what that translates to the NFL draft. I'm not an NFL draft expert. I don't. None of that stuff really matters to me. What I'll say is he is not a top 5 cornerback in college football right now. He might be a top 5 player in college football, but as just a true corner, he's not a top 5 corner. But I've also said I think he could be if he focused just on corner because he's immensely talented. He's just kids playing like 100 snaps a game. I just don't get why they think that's good for him. I don't think that it is. I really don't. We'll see. All right. Just your ordinary Joe. Thank you, Joe. Some abilities seem hardwired. You can't teach speed. Might be true of certain cognitive abilities, such as processing reads. How exactly do quarterback coaches empower prowess in that skill? I mean, some guys don't. Like Ian Book never got really better at that. And that's something that killed him in the NFL. He just doesn't process quickly. And some guys can't be taught that. Some guys just aren't good at that. My thing with Riley Leonard and why I'm not panicking about maybe he's that way, and this isn't necessarily what you're asking, Joe, but I kind of feel like it's behind it, is I've seen him do those things. I've seen him process well at Duke. I just think he's struggling in the Notre Dame offense for a host of reasons. But as far as what coaches can do, there's a lot of different things. You've got to make sure that you've spent the proper time in the film room and on the board, getting quarterbacks to understand the structure of what you're trying to accomplish, talking through what your offense is doing, why you're doing it, why you're reading this particular play. Like you can tell a quarterback, hey, your read key is this guy on this play. If he does this, he does that. If he does this, you do that. And then just go out there and practice it. And some guys get it, but other guys kind of need to be explained, okay, but why am I throwing to him if he does this? And why am I doing that? And why am I doing this? And perhaps Riley needs that. Perhaps they're not. I mean, it could be as simple as they're not doing this stuff enough in practice. I mean, when you're a quarterback, if you're going to run a smash concept, you need to have run that hundreds of times before you get to a game. You know, maybe they're not doing that. I mean, there's a lot of things you can do, but you need those reps. You need the board reps, you need the film reps, and you need the field reps. And when I had a quarterback who was really struggling mentally, I would really break it down and simplify it. I would kind of take it one read it. We'd kind of do walkthrough periods at certain times, and they're an individual and say, hey, listen, here's what we're doing. Like, let's talk through it. Let's walk through it. Tell me what's in your head. What are you thinking here? Why are you not seeing this? Talk me through this play. So like the play that I broke down on the all 22, I would not like, come on, freaking Riley, you got to make that play, man. What's going on? I said, okay, talk to me here. Talk me through what you saw. Because you got to get inside his head and figure out why he's seeing things that way and why did you go away from your read so quickly? Talk me through it. There, in his head, there was some sort of justification for him doing that. You need to understand that first, and then that's how you rep it and that's how you fix it, if you can fix it. And look, some guys who used to process well, they get that I don't call it the yips, but like they get to the point where they lose that confidence and it doesn't always come back. And hopefully that's not the case with Riley. Billy Napier's water bottle. How long do you think Deion will stay at Colorado before moving on to another school? Do you foresee him leaving shortly after his kids leave, or do you think he'll stay as long as Colorado allows? I don't. My opinion of this has changed in recent years. I don't think Deion's going to stay much longer after his kids leave. Matter of fact, if he gets a job, like a different Power 5 job after this year, because I think both of his kids are gone, right? I think he would take it. I used to think Deion. No, I think Deion, he might stay there for a while. They're going to let him do what he wants to do. I think if the right job came along, he would leave. I don't see, he doesn't show me anything. He shows me that Deion's all about Deion and Deion's all about his kids. And I had such high hopes that he would be a little different than that. I don't know why I did, but he has not shown me that he is in it for, let's build up Colorado. I think Coach Sanders is in it to build up Coach Sanders and to build up his kids. He has coached more like a dad than he has a head coach, in my opinion. And he's got 3 kids on the team. It's Shador, Shiloh, and Travis Hunter is kind of how he treats it. So we'll see. We'll see. PB and Jelly Time. I got to tell you, I can't stand questions like this, to be honest with you. Can you please give an honest assessment as to why Leonard is the better option for winning a national championship than Kenny or CJ? I'm not talking about making a play, I'm talking about winning. Every assessment I give is an honest assessment. You don't need to tell me to give you an honest assessment. If I'm giving you my opinion, then it is my honest opinion. Whether I'm right or wrong, it's an honest opinion. Why is Riley Leonard a better option for winning a championship than Kenny or CJ? Number one, you have seen him do it. You've seen him thrive. You've seen him have 300-plus yard games. You've seen him have 500 yards of offense games. You've seen him, use his legs to take over games against your team, against Clemson, against North Carolina, against good football teams. You've seen him do it. And if he doesn't get back to that, then he won't give you that chance. But right now, based on what he's done in the past, that he's capable of playing it a way that helps you compete for a championship. Does Kenny and CJ have the physical talent to lead you to a championship? Of course. No question. I've said in the past that I think Notre Dame can win with both of those guys. The question you have to ask yourself as a staff is when you're evaluating them, it's like, okay, I know that CJ has this great arm. He's smart. He's this, he's that. But is he ready to translate that onto Saturdays? That's the assessment you have to make as a staff. You say, okay, I think that Kenny can do this with his arm and with his legs, and he's mentally very smart. But is he in a position to where he can go out there and make plays on Saturday the way we need him to? You have to ask yourself that. Then the other part of the equation is, do you feel your receivers right now are playing at a level where if you put a quarterback in the game that loses the running ability that that Riley Leonard has, do you have enough playmaking ability for now that teams are going to focus on your running backs? Do you have enough playmaking ability on the perimeter that more of the throwing type of quarterbacks can be impactful? I'm not saying they do or don't. I'm saying these are the things that you have to look at. And so when I look at Riley Leonard, I see a guy that right now is not playing good football as a thrower. He's still giving you a lot of impact as a runner. When you look at how teams defend Notre Dame's run game, you see that Riley Leonard's having an impact. When you see linebackers running with Riley while the running backs are going that way, you say he's having an impact. Is he good enough right now to allow Notre Dame to go out and win a championship right now? Absolutely not. But the reason that you're willing to be more patient with him is because you do have a lot of evidence that he can be that player on Saturdays. When you look at Kenny and CJ, it's more of a risk. And you have a head coach that's a bit risk averse, naturally risk averse. There's two types of risks. There's the risks of, okay, Riley's not playing well and we need to get him going. And then there's the risk of, hey, this guy is not, he doesn't have those struggles, but I don't know what he's going to be like if I put him in the game when it matters. Because even if let's say you put Kenny in the game, let's say Notre Dame goes out this weekend and let's say Steve, tweaks his ankle or gets sick before the game and nothing major, just something minor. So, when you're blowing out Miami of Ohio, it's 42-0 at halftime. You put Kenny in the game. Kenny comes out and goes 8 of 9, 130 yards, 2 touchdowns. You're not like, all right, let's throw him out there next week against Louisville because it's a different situation. And that's part of the evaluation you have to make. Now, as a coach, you may say, hey, look, this kid's playing at a really high level. We saw him do it in a practice. We came out, we saw him do it here. He's doing these. But it's a different animal when you come off the bench and you're up 42-0 and you get thrown in the game than when you're put in a game and it's 0-0. Or when your first series is when they're up 7-0 because they went down the field and scored. I mean, there's just so many different aspects of this that as a coach, you have to make that decision. And so if I would assume, because I don't know why Notre Dame's making their decision they're making, I would assume that when they look at Riley Leonard, they see a guy that even for all his struggles is still a playmaker. Even for a guy that's got the struggles he did when it was 13-13 in the fourth quarter of that game, made 2 huge throws to take your team down and score a touchdown on top of making plays. I know that in these moments, he can make those plays. I know that he's got better ability that he can tap into because we've seen it on film, right? We've seen that on film. Now, you now have to get to the point, like, here's where Notre Dame is at with this assessment, in my opinion, where I would be at if I was Notre Dame. I'll say that way. Right now, I'm not in panic mode yet with Riley. I'm a little concerned, but I'm not in panic mode. I'd work with him. I'd do the things I talked about earlier. But if you don't see growth in these next 2 games mentally, where he's more comfortable, even if you come out of these 2 games with wins, you have to ask yourself, is this a team capable of really making a deep run? And I don't know that you are. But at the same time, you then have to ask yourself, but if these younger kids aren't capable of doing that yet, then I'm still sticking with Riley, because as a head coach, even if I think that he can only get you to the playoff and maybe a win, it's not guaranteed those other kids can even get you to the playoff yet. That's the deal. So, like, even if you thought that maybe the ceiling for CJ and Kenny was higher right now, you can't guarantee that the floor will be as high. And that's the balance that a head coach has to make in this type of situation, and knows he has to make is it better for us to guarantee, let's just say you could do this, guarantee a playoff spot and a first round win, but we're probably not doing anything after that? Or do you say, let's go with the younger guy, knowing there's a good chance we could drop another game or two because it might help us next year, but now you're in year 3. Now you've got a disappointing 9-3 season, 10-2 season, and you're trying to sell people on, but next year. And you know, those are the different things that you have to look at and say, hey, listen, man, you've got to figure out, where you're kind of going with this, and that's kind of, I mean, I don't know if that answered your question or not, but that's kind of where you have to look at it. It's that balance of what you know versus what you don't know. You know that Riley's struggling right now, but you also know that he can do certain things. And that's kind of where I'm at with that. And hey, by the way, I don't hate your question. I think if you were to say, hey, can you explain why Riley Leonard is the better option for winning a championship? Right? That I don't have any problem with that. It's a pet peeve of mine. So just how people talk. I don't care. I'm telling you, I don't receive that well. Right? When people say, give me an honest opinion. What's your honest opinion? Well, I always give you my honest opinion. And so if you ask me a question, assume that I'm going to give you an honest opinion. I may not be right, but I'm going to give you an honest opinion. That's always true. That's the one thing you can count on for me. All right. Irish Gordian Knot, how would you grade Drake Bowen so far? I'd say probably B- right now for me, based on what my expectations were and where he is with his development. I think Drake's done some solid things. I think he has done a good job of being, coming downhill, taking on blocks, being in the right position where he kind of needs to be. What I need to see more from him, though, is I need to see him make more plays. I mean, he's their number 2 leading tackler right now. He's got 13 tackles through 3 games, so he's doing some good things. He's got more assisted than solos. I don't love seeing that. I'd like to see him get a few more solo stops. I think the next level for Drake is getting better, getting off some of those blocks and getting to the football. That's going to be the next step for him. So I'd say B-. He's been solid in pass pro. Where you look at like Jaden Ausberry and you look at Kingston, they've had the more flashy plays, but they've also had some of the big mistakes that have cost the team big, especially Kingston, not running with the running back on that wheel concept. And I'd have to go back and look at the other wide, or not the wheel, but the seam. He's got to run with that, play that ball, didn't play it well. 83-yard touchdown. And I'd have to go back and look. I don't know if it was Drake or the other linebacker that was responsible for that wheel route that happened in that game. But he's been solid. There's another level he can get to, and he needs to get to it. But I'm comfortable with where the rotation is right now. I think having Jaden and Kingston coming off the bench is still the best thing for them, because it takes some of that pressure off and allows them to be a little bit flashier and with how they play. Aiden Benami says, do you think Benjamin Morrison is grabbing more and not as improved as we'd like in his 3rd year? Not hating at all, honest question. I think Benjamin Morrison's been very good. I mean, he's had a couple plays here and there, but that's part of it. He's been very good so far this season. If you look at his numbers, he's given up, I think, 3 downfield catches all year. Everything else has been kind of quick stuff right in front of him. He's still been very good this year. So no, I don't think he's grabbing. I just think he's maybe a little rusty after missing some time. I'd say maybe that would be it. But no, I don't. I think he continues. He's a really good football player. Really good football player. Aiden Regan, Chris Mitchell hasn't got nearly enough touches this year. I believe he's a sleeping giant. What are ways you could scheme him open to get him the ball in space? Well, number one is in some of those plays where you just got a one-on-one, just say, hey, man, just drop back and throw it. Hey, Chris, look, when we get cover one here, you got to win at the line and then run as fast as you can, and then we're going to drop back and throw you the football. Just go. I think some other things you do, like the play, the route that they ran to Jaden Thomas. So, Aiden, I don't know if you're on the message board, if you're a premium member, but I did put a video up today of their third down, and they ran this little concept where they got Jaden Thomas the ball in space. Good play, got Jaden the ball. I'd like to see them do something like that with Chris Mitchell. Do something to kind of get Chris into an early rhythm, right? And to say, throw him a couple screens, or just say you're going to take a shot or two, get him on some over concepts, where you can use his speed to just run. Because he's not playing a lot of confidence right now. And in this, and it's not just games. We kind of saw this a little bit in fall camp. If you guys remember some of the reporting on fall camp, like I thought he dropped a couple balls early and it just looked like he was battling confidence. And you've got to try to figure out ways to get that confidence back or go with somebody else. And, with Jordan Faison and KK Smith, it's like you need Chris to kind of step up soon. And I would like to find out what he's made of. I would love it if they came out tomorrow and had a couple shots designed to him, either vertical shots or horizontal shots, something where you're going to try to say, hey, listen, we're going to try to get 10 to football here. And if he's not there, take the check down. I think it'd be good. See what you got. And if he doesn't step up and make plays, then maybe it's time to move on to somebody else. But I just want to see Chris play with a little bit more urgency, but it's too soon to give up on him, completely give up on him right now. John A1, in terms of passing only, how far away is Riley Leonard's play this season compared to his 2022 season at Duke? Pretty far. He's just not seeing things very well right now. The reason that the Saturday game was encouraging to me is because he looked more confident as a thrower. The RPO throw that he made to Jaden Thomas was a vintage Riley play, side arming it, reading the corner fire, siding arming it. Some of those quicker reads that he was making, the third down throws to Mitchell Evans were right on point, right on target. So, they're not hard throws. Yeah, they're not hard throws. They're not super, super easy throws, but you got to hit them perfectly and let that guy keep running for it to work. And he did, but it's the processing part, right? That's the big thing. And if he can figure that out, it's like the light's either going to go on or he's just going to kind of stay here. And depending on how long he stays here is when you got to start making decisions, but I'm not there just yet. But throwing wise, he's not that much different when he lets it rip. The other thing he's done this year that he needs to do a much better job of, he's just aiming the ball too much. Just let it rip, man. Just snap that thing out there and get the ball. It's just, you can tell. But that's what happens when mentally you're thinking too much. It slows everything else down and forces you to just kind of be out of rhythm. And he's got to figure out how to get out of that funk. BK's last brain cell, has Emil Wagner look like an elite athlete at tackle in your opinion, and how do you see him progressing moving forward? He hasn't looked like an elite athlete. He's looked like a good athlete, and he's been steady so far. I think that's the biggest thing for me with Emil is he's just been steady. Like, I think there's some flash still left in there. I think there's some dominance left in there. But the big thing is give me a consistent guy over a flashy. Like right now, Emil doesn't have nearly as many dominant blocks as Anthony Knapp. It's not close, but he has been way better because he's just been consistently doing his job. And that's ultimately, at the end of the day, kind of all I want at the minimum is to do that. Give me that over the flashy guy that makes a lot of mistakes. Now, as I've explained before, I'll live with that because eventually the flashy guy that makes a lot of mistakes, you hope that the mistakes kind of get worked out. But with Emil, it's like, just do your job. And then as he gets more and more comfortable, then maybe you'll start to see some of the more dominant blocks. And we kind of saw that a little bit against Purdue. I thought that was without question Emil's best game. I thought he came off the ball harder. He had a few more move blocks. A move block for me is it's not a type of block. It's you came off the line and you moved somebody. He had more of those type of blocks against Purdue, and that was a good sign to see. So you started to see like, okay, is this just Purdue is not that good? And that's, again, what we don't know. On film, I liked Purdue. I thought Purdue did some really good things with their run defense end of the year last year. And, yes, they lost, Scourton, and, he's at A&M, but they almost ran for 200 yards against A&M as well. And he held his own in that game also. So seeing a few more of those flash plays was an encouraging sign from Emil. Now you just hope that it can kind of build on it week after week and keep playing well. But as long as he's just playing just do your job every snap. I'm okay with that, and hopefully some of the dominant blocks come. But he's a good athlete. I wouldn't say that I've seen him as an elite athlete. I don't know that I've ever seen him as an elite athlete. He's just a very good athlete with great length and great natural pop. Balpine Shillelagh, of the following coaches, who would you say had the biggest rise in the past 5 years? Denbrock, Al Golden, Mike Mickens, Dylan McCullough, Marcus Freeman. You can consider rise in position, rise in ability, etc. I mean, the biggest riser there is clearly Marcus Freeman. I mean, 5 years ago, Mike Denbrock was a offensive coordinator, and he's still an offensive coordinator. He's gone to better schools. He went from Cincinnati to LSU, now Notre Dame. Al Golden went from a position coach in the NFL to a D coordinator in Notre Dame. I'd say Mike Mickens is probably next highest riser because he's still in the same position, but his prestige and reputation has skyrocketed from where it was 5 years ago nationally, because the guy came from Cincinnati that nobody really knew about, and now he's starting to get some love as one of the best DB coaches in the business. Dylan McCullough was considered one of the best position running back coaches in the country 5 years ago, and he's still considered one of the best running back coaches in the business 5 years later. I don't think he's had a rise at all. The only thing he has is now more Notre Dame fans are aware of him, but I don't know he's had a rise. He's always been a good coach. Marcus Freeman 5 years ago was the defensive coordinator at Cincinnati, and now he's the head football coach in Notre Dame. So by far the biggest rise in position. I don't know that any of them's ability has changed. It's Mike Mickens was always a great DB coach. It's just we're more aware of it now. Mike Denbrock and now Golden didn't have a change in ability in 5 years. They've just had opportunities to kind of show themselves for who they are, and they finally got some players and some elite players and did what they did. So, I mean, Marcus Freeman to me is the biggest riser. No question about that. So, interesting question. Aiden Benami, obviously whoever's open or whoever is hot, etc., that's understood. But what wide receivers do you think is the most important to get rolling? That's a fair question, and I like the premise. That's a very fair question, Aiden. Jaden Greathouse and Chris Mitchell are the two biggest ones for me. And if Chris Mitchell, if you can't get him going, then you need to get KK Smith and Cam Williams going. KK first and then Cam. That would be my pecking order. But I'd like to see if you could tell me of all the receivers right now, you can only make sure that one guy really takes off moving forward. Who would that be? It'd be Jaden Greathouse. That would be the one for me. John A1, after seeing the talent of Notre Dame's backup offensive tackles and knowing Charles Jagusah is also returning next year, will Anthony Knapp play the tackle position in 2025? It's way too early for that, John, for me to answer that question. Based on how he's played in 3 games, no, he won't be playing tackle next year. But he's a true freshman playing in his 3rd game. I mean, I would expect him to get better. So let's kind of see how he develops. But just overall thinking about just his skill set, I still believe he's better suited inside. But the question then is where? Because if Ashton Craig and Billy Schrouth and Sam Pendleton all come back next year, is Anthony Knapp better than any of those guys? He's not better than Emil Wagner. He's farther along than Charles Jagusah technically and knowing the offense and all that type of stuff. But I mean, the game last week was very clear that Charles Jagusah is a very talented player, and Gilby Lambert, and Charles Jagusah is already better than him. So, but we don't know how Charles Jagusah would have looked in the first 3 games of last year. Probably wouldn't have looked as good as Anthony Knapp has looked. But again, he wasn't an early enrollee. So I just think it's not so much about – I just think his skill sets, to your point, John, it's the talent at tackle is very good, and his skill set just makes me think he's still ultimately an interior player. Archer 452. After 3 weeks, which upcoming game do you have interest in for which you did not have any interest in the preseason? Mine is Nebraska and Indiana. That's a pretty good one. I would have not at all thought about that game being one that I cared about early in the season. I would not have thought about that at all. So that's certainly one. Trying to think of some others. I don't know that there's a lot of other games that I necessarily would have cared about watching. I guess I'm even more intrigued to see Tennessee at Georgia now, the way that Tennessee's playing right now. But that was going to be a big game anyway. I'm trying to think of some other games that Oregon, Ohio State right now is you're an Ohio State fan, so that game is not necessarily more interesting, but boy, it's my thought about how that game is going to go is a little bit different now than it was in the off season. I'm just trying to think. Yeah, there's really not a lot of games that have necessarily piqued my interest because honestly, Archer, for me, it's just I'm not overly concerned with making too many sweeping conclusions about teams after 2-3 games. I'm probably about a week or so away. There's a chance after this week that my answer will change a whole lot because, like a lot of these teams, it's like, what do we really know about some of these teams, right? And we're going to start to get a few more answers now. But I like yours. For now, I'm going to kind of take yours. I think there's a couple others. I'll tell you, here's some. You know what? This team just popped in my head. Based on what I've seen so far this season, there's a couple weeks from now, right? I really want to see that Ohio State-Michigan State game. That's a game I'm very intrigued to see. Very intrigued to see because I think we're going to learn a lot about both teams. I'm not saying Ohio State's going to lose that game. I'm just saying I'm a lot more intrigued about how that game's going to play out now than I was at the beginning of the season. Peter Freibert, will Notre Dame ever put a Notre Dame alum in the booth for their TV broadcast? I would probably, I'd never say never, but I would lean towards, they've already done that. Jack Collinsworth was a Notre Dame alum, so they've already done that. Hold on, let me just look at something real quick. Let's see, where'd he go? I know his wife went to Notre Dame. No, he went to Arizona. I say Dan Hicks's wife went to Notre Dame, so he has a spouse that went to Notre Dame. But they had an alum in the booth the last 2 years with Jack Collinsworth. So when will they do it again? I think what you're kind of referring to is a former player. That I don't know. I doubt that one. Who's the Notre Dame guy that even works for NBC? And would Brady Quinn be worth throwing the money at to bring him into Notre Dame games? I would definitely have Brady Quinn doing Notre Dame games. I don't know that Brady would want to do that because here's the thing you got to look at. Like Brady Quinn is a former player. He clearly loves Notre Dame. Clearly loves Notre Dame. He's done a lot of work in the NIL sphere and all that kind of stuff. But the question I would ask is, but does Brady want to be pigeonholed as the Notre Dame guy when it comes to his profession? I don't know that I would necessarily want to do that if I was Brady. Now if NBC said, hey, listen, Brady, we're going to have you do the Notre Dame games, but we really want to make you a feature in our overall pregame show and things like that. Like, I think NBC should really consider over the next couple of years kind of launching a pregame show or like a game day type of show that Fox has one and they have one and NBC does a little something, I believe, but something a little bit bigger because that's how you're going to get some of that talent to come over. So, if Brady's doing the Notre Dame games, but he's doing featured spots and, hey, we're going to make you a primetime evaluator and of different things. And so maybe then I would consider it, but I don't know that it would be necessarily a great career move for Brady Quinn to go from what he's doing now to just being the color guy for Notre Dame games. That's the problem that you're going to run into. And then if you're going to get somebody else who's not that, in a lot of instances, are you getting someone that's really qualified to do that job? But there's some guys out there like Ryan Harris is doing it. Maybe you look at that direction and, I think, does Mike Golick Jr. still do games? Maybe something you look in that direction. I don't know how much I would do that, but then you look at a guy like Mike Golick and he's got so many other things going on. Would that be a move that would make sense for him? Could he still do his podcasting stuff and all that type of stuff if he were to take that kind of job? So there's just a lot that goes into it, but for me personally, a huge Brady Quinn fan. I'd love to see Brady Quinn be the color guy. Would love to see him do that. So I know Aaron Taylor does some of that, but again, Aaron Taylor's thing that he does for CBS, he does color, but he's also one of the primary analysts for their CBS show that they do all the time. So it couldn't just be, okay, come over here and just do Notre Dame games. I don't know that any of those guys would have any interest in doing that at this point in time. So I would love it if Brady did it or even Aaron Taylor did it. And maybe if he came to NBC, he'd be more willing to pick Notre Dame to win some of these big games. Tommy Guns, Brian, is there any truth to the report that Florida will make a run at Coach Free and that Indy is currently conducting just in case conversation with Urban Meyer? No, there isn't. Just no. Aiden Regan, when you watch a football game, what are your first things you look at? Also, shout out to you for saying my last name correctly, Regan, not Reagan. I think I said it wrong the first time, but after I said it wrong the first time, I was like, hold on a second. I don't think that's correct. As I said, one of my favorite comedians' name is spells the name like yours and it's pronounced Regan. So that's in fairness, I had a little bit of help. And if you haven't seen Brian Regan's skit, he's pretty funny. He's been around a long time. My wife and I saw him live a few years ago now. I think he was out in Elkhart. He was hilarious. Very, very funny. But when you watch a football game, what are the first things you look at? So it's interesting. A couple things that I look at is I tend to not watch the offensive line and defensive lines a whole lot throughout the game, but I usually focus on them the first couple series, at least the first series, because I want to see, what kind of get off, what kind of drive, what kind of fire does this team have in the trenches? Because that's a lot of times, if your line is playing hard, it's indicative of your team is fired up and everybody else kind of follows. And so that's usually one of the first things that I see that I look for when I'm first watching a game. And then there's other aspects of every game that are unique. I should probably get back to doing this article a lot more, but I used to kind of put out this article of what to look for. And I know I did that in the first game against A&M. I talked about, okay, if they're going to play well, these are some things you're going to see early. I should probably get back to doing that article or maybe doing a little video on that. But yeah, we'll see. But like it's each game is going to be specific. So like for this game, okay, is Riley Leonard sticking with his reads a little bit more early in the game, or is he still rushing reads? Like that would be something in this game I would look for. But that's not true of every game necessarily. When you talk about evaluating quarterbacks, how calm does the guy look in the pocket early in the game? Sometimes you can see a quarterback early in the game. I mean, his feet are going 100 miles an hour and he's sailing balls. And you're like, if they don't calm this kid down, he's going to have a long day. So other guys, it's like this kid struggled on film, but man, he came out in that game and his feet were calm and he was going through his reads and he was on time and in a good rhythm. So that's another one that I'll look at. And just overall, just what does the team's energy look like? Because you don't get the same thing every week from teams. What's the team's energy look like? And what's the opponent's energy look like? But the primary thing is just kind of looking in the trenches and seeing what kind of fire they're coming off at. Peter Freibert, what team has been the most disappointing so far this season? I mean, there's no other answer than Florida State. I mean, preseason top 10 team that's 0-3 and hasn't even looked good in their 0-3. Like they are really bad. Really bad. Ghost X, if Gerby Lambert or Sullivan Absher continues to develop in a positive and potentially position-challenging manner, would Joe Rudolph consider sliding Knapp inside? Could Rocco performance? I would assume could Rocco's performance have anything to do with that? I mean, look, nobody on the line right now is playing in a way to where, okay, that's a locked up job because Billy's out. I think Billy kind of had a job locked up. I wouldn't even say Ashton was necessarily doing that because of the two big holds. I mean, he had two big runs brought back because of because of his holds. But currently right now, like, look, Emil's to me playing well, but if Gerby Lambert, if the light goes on for Gerby could be better than Emil at some point in time. I'm not saying it's going to happen, and you'd have to consider doing that. So nobody's job is safe, and especially not Anthony Knapp's. But here's the thing: if you move Knapp inside, who do you replace? He's played only left tackle. How easy is it going to be to move him to right guard if you were unhappy with Rocco's play, or to center if you were unhappy with Pat Coogan's play, or left guard in case you didn't like what Sam Pendleton was doing? I don't know that would be the case. I think if anything, you would move Knapp inside, but he wouldn't start right away. I think it would just be more about, hey, Sullivan just beat him out at left tackle, or Gerby's ready to move over there and play left tackle or something like that. That would be more of what I would see. And then Knapp would move inside and then battle for a job next year. Now, if there's another injury, see, here's the thing. Like, let's say that there's another injury up front. Let's say one of your guards goes down again. I mean, I kind of feel like your next man in is Sullivan Absher. And then your question would be, okay, where does Sullivan give you the best chance right now? Like, do you just plug out Sullivan in there at guard? Or do you put Sullivan at tackle and then move Anthony inside. I think that would be a conversation to have, but I don't know that Anthony Knapp would be better inside than the options you have inside. So I don't see that part happening. Joseph Barrett. Oh, we talked about that one. Sorry, Joseph. Charles Faust. Will Irish Breakdown ever go back to having a dedicated recruiting show? I liked getting updates on commit seasons and target info. Obviously, only one can truly replace Ryan. Eventually, we'll get there, but not right now. Right now, there's just not a ton of that time there. It's just there's a lot of reasons why. But right now, we're not going to have a dedicated show. We will eventually get back to that, sure. But most likely for this season, we'll occasionally have recruiting shows when we need to have recruiting shows. But for now, that's not something we're going to have right now. But eventually, we'll get back to that. And there's a lot of reasons why business decisions, most of it's business decisions. And that's just kind of where we are right now. Are Goodman, if you were on the staff, would you continue to fight for Deuce, or would you move on and try to flip another quarterback in the 2025 class? I don't see why. I've said this about. I don't know why you can't do both. Like, I don't know why you can't continue to fight for Deuce and try to flip another quarterback in the class. Like, look, you're not going to flip a guy tomorrow. You know, like recruit the guys you need to recruit. Look at the guys you like. See if there's someone that you think is worth flipping. You can start recruiting him now. Say, listen, look, here's the deal, man. Like, this Deuce Knight keeps telling us he's not going to flip, but he's visited Auburn literally every weekend of the season so far. Every weekend. And apparently Deuce is going back again this weekend and is being encouraged to go back again this weekend. So Auburn has now played, 4 games, and Deuce has been at, I think, all of them. So does anyone think that's the actions of a committed player? No, it's not. But he has not officially flipped yet. And so there's no reason for you to panic and screw you or moving on to somebody else. You can still, there's no rule that says you can't recruit other quarterbacks, and they are. But there's also no need to, if he's still talking to you and he's still telling you the things you need to hear, then keep recruiting him. It's September. There's no need to panic. There's no need to panic right now. Some of you in the chat are answering the question of why. Part of the reason why we're not doing as much recruiting right now, and that goes into the business decision part of it. Zach Martin. So I'm glad that some of you guys, it confirms like the decisions I make. So I appreciate that. Zach Martin, if Anthony Knapp's pass pro doesn't improve, could you see Lambert shifting there with his length and athleticism? I would. Zach, I would consider that for sure. I would absolutely consider that. I don't know that Notre Dame is. I don't know that he's been like, here's the thing. Here's the struggle with making that decision is you don't just do that in a week. You don't just say, okay, Anthony struggled against Miami, Ohio, so let's move him to left tackle, or, so let's move Gerby to left tackle. Gerby's never played left tackle. He literally started at right tackle in high school. He's been at right tackle in Notre Dame. Eventually, you're going to have to get him a lot of work over there. And I don't know that, I don't know that they've done any of that. They may have. They may be getting him work in practice. It's that's going to have to happen first. You need to see how he can even handle that position. And as far as I know, they haven't done that with him. But I would, with his athleticism, length, power, I would strongly consider that. Yes, absolutely. Because it's like, oh, you don't want to worry about getting your quarterback hurt. Or you mean like when your left tackle gets launched into your quarterback's chest when you're about to throw a touchdown pass? Like, yeah, that's a problem. That's a problem. Now, the other thing to consider is moving Emil over there and Gerby slides in at right tackle. They could decide to give someone an Absher shot there. I mean, there's a lot of things they could do. I don't know that Joe Rudolph is going to do that, but I would certainly consider it. And I also would consider, hey, let's give Anthony to the next couple games to see how he's going to improve, because he's still just a true freshman playing his 3rd game. And hopefully he improves. Wyatt Kerwin, let's say hypothetically Notre Dame can only play guys with sophomore or younger eligibility. What are your 22 starters, offense and defense, considering the starters and backups? How good could they be? Boy. So I can only play starters, sophomores. Oh, man. Quarterback, I'd go with Kenny or CJ. Your running back's the same. Well, here's the thing about this. Your offense doesn't change a whole lot. So on offense, you'd have this, like, Okay, let's say if we're going to do this hypothetical, then let's say that there aren't injuries. So Billy Schrouth and Ashton Craig aren't injured. Your starting offensive line doesn't change. They were literally all freshman or sophomore eligibility. At tight end, Raritan and Flanagan both have freshman, sophomore eligibility. Your tight end room doesn't change a whole lot. Your wide receivers, you still have Great House. You still have Jordan Faison. You still have KK Smith, Cam Williams, Mike. I mean, you have everybody except for the transfers and Jaden Thomas. So your receiving core would be who the boundary would be. Micah Gilbert, maybe. You'd have Jaden Greathouse, Jordan Faison out there. You'd have KK Smith. You'd have Micah Gilbert. You'd have Cam Williams. You'd still be pretty good there. Your running back room, you literally only lose Devin Ford. That's it. And defensively, you'd have Boubacar starting. You'd have Josh Burnham starting. You'd have Junior and Bryce Young as your backups at Viper. Logan Thomas there. Defensive tackle is where it would get a little interesting because you'd have Donovan Heinisch, but you'd lose all your other rotation guys for right now. You'd lose Onye, Mills, and Cross. You'd have Armo Mukum there. You'd have Brendan Vernon, Devin Houston. So that'd be the question mark right now. You'd be very young there. Your linebacking room, you just take Jet Kaiser out and you're good to go. Everybody else is there. You'd lose Benjamin Morris in a corner. I'd start Leonard Moore. Still be pretty good there. Not nearly as good as with Benjamin, but you still be pretty good there. At safety, you'd take a hit. You'd lose Xavier Watts. That's a big hit. And then you'd go with, Kennedy Urlacher, Luke Talich, and Ben Minnick as sort of that next group in. So that's still a pretty good squad. I'd be concerned about who's your boundary receiver. Is Micah Gilbert ready for that? I'd be concerned about the D-tackle position, and then I'd be concerned about my safeties opposite of Don, and who's going to play nickel. So those would be my question marks. But that'd still be a pretty good team, which is partly why there's so much excitement, right? I mean, that's kind of part of the reason you're so fired up about the future of this team, because you're seeing a lot of those freshman and sophomore eligibility guys playing. So, yeah. Irish-blooded, better battleship configuration, 3 turrets U.S. style that take longer to reload, or 2 turret European style that reload faster. I don't have an opinion on this. I mean, my thought would be the 3 turret style, simply because you can get more out at a time. I understand the idea of reloading faster, but I kind of like the idea of a battleship is not so much about speed. It's more about power. And, if I can get 3, if you get 3 at a time going, what do they have? Like three each, right? So 3 turrets. And, yeah, I mean, I could also be impartial, a little biased, because I do think the American battleships were at least, they don't really use them like they used to, or have a lot of, how many of them are even still in commission now? But I mean, that was a monster, but I would want more firepower. I mean, the speed and the reload, that's your destroyers, that's your cruisers, stuff like that. I want my battleship to unload as much ferocity at a time as it can. And yeah, that would be mine. But again, that's just very, very loose opinion that I have. Stephen B, same question that we just had. Any chance that Absher or Lambert passes Anthony Knapp? It's possible. I don't know that they're there right now. Joseph Barrett. Brian, if you were Florida's AD, would you dismiss Billy Napier right now? Then who would be your choice as the next head coach? Like, look, I'm not a big fan. I'm not a big fan of calling for people's jobs. If you're asking me my decision, it's one thing to say that I think Florida's going to move on from him. It's another thing to say, would I fire him? I don't feel comfortable doing that. I'm a former football coach. I got fired. It's not a pleasant thing. It's part of the reason I don't call for coaches to get fired. I also, in theory, am not a big fan of firing coaches in the middle of the season unless they are doing things to create problems within your program. They're breaking rules. They're not doing their job. So let's say Billy Napier's just like, F it. I know I'm going to get fired at the end of the year, so I'm not coming in. I'm not doing meetings. I'm not working hard. Okay, he's giving you cause at that point in time, but I don't know that that's what's going on. I just don't think he's doing a very good job. So I'm not a huge fan of firing coaches in the middle of the season. So I'm not super. I know some people have no problem talking about firing people, and hey, I don't care if he's a wife and kids. Screw that. I don't care. Needs to be fired. I am someone who, as a football coach, had to go home and tell my wife, "Hey, babe, sorry, I don't have my job anymore." And so it's not just a podcast fun topic for me. And Joseph, there's nothing wrong with your question, man. It's a very fair question. I'm just hoping you understand why I'm not comfortable answering it, to be honest with you. So I just want to make sure that you understand it's not a shot at you. It's the other. Somebody says, would you have a problem firing BBG or BK? No, same thing. I mean, look, I didn't like Brian Kelly. I couldn't stand Brian Kelly. I couldn't stand Brian Van Gorder. I never once called for them to be fired publicly because it's just not my place to do so. It's my job to evaluate who's there. It's my job to say they're not doing a good enough job. And then it's up to the AD and the other people to decide what to do with that. It's just not something that I feel. I just think we're way too flippant in our society calling for people to have their livelihoods affected. And look, I get it. They make a lot of money. But you think that 6-year-old kid of that head coach understands, well, you know, daddy makes a lot of money and this is part of the job. No, he's like, okay, so now I can't be around my friends anymore. Like, no, I'm not going to just do that on a podcast because people like it or it's going to get me clicks. And I'm not saying you're doing that, Joseph. I'm just saying like that's kind of the same type of thing. So it's just not my place. I can say, hey, look, I think this is what Florida's going to do. But to say if it was up to me, would I do it? No, it's not up to me. And so it really is just not something that I feel super great about. Just not something I feel great about. But I mean, if Florida's going to make a move, I still think if you're going to fire a coach in season, this is just in general, Joseph. If you're going to fire a coach in season, I still believe that doing it during a bye is the smartest time for that football team. It's the best time for that football team. And it gives you some time to kind of make the move, make the transition, get the proper piece of people in place. You know, players are going to have a bit of an emotional reaction to that. Gives them a little bit more time to do that. And that's kind of where I'm at on that. So it's a fair, Joseph, just I will make sure you hear me on this one. It's a fair question. It's part of the business. And I'm not even saying that people that talk about coaching get fired are wrong. If they view that as important to their job, then that's their business. I'm telling you, for me, this is my opinion. It's not something I'm comfortable with. And honestly, it has no bearing on what's going to happen. And my job as an analyst is to evaluate the reality. The reality is Billy Napier is doing a poor job. Does that mean he should get fired? That's somebody else's job to decide, not mine. I'm just going to tell you, as long as he's the head coach, this is the job he's doing. And I don't mind telling you after the fact what I would have done. Like, honestly, like I've been very open about if I was in Notre Dame's shoes, I would have fired Brian Van Gorder after the 2014 season. But at the time, because it's the deed is done. It's been done. It's not impacting anybody. This is what I would have done, because I do understand that firing people is a necessity in business. You know, sometimes you've got to fire people. If you're paying them to do a job, they're not doing the job. And they're responsible for the livelihoods of a lot of other people. I understand all that. It's not that you shouldn't fire people. Oh, it's not something I'm flippantly going to do. I hope people understand that. I do. And I understand if you're frustrated that I don't answer it. Totally get it, Joseph, because like I said, it's a very fair question. It's just not something that I'm super comfortable doing, because I just, like, in the press conference, everybody else calls Coach Freeman Marcus. I don't. Because to me, as a former coach, it's a signal of respect to say Coach Freeman or Coach Denbrock or Coach Golden. I would never call them in a public setting Mike or Al or Marcus. Does that mean when Tim Priester or Tim O'Malley or John Bryce or anybody else calls him Marcus that they're wrong? Absolutely not. Absolutely not, because it's different for them. It's their background's different. They're journalists. They're not former coaches, and that's not better or worse. It's just different. You have to do what you're comfortable with. And for me, I just look at things different because I come from that life, because I played college football, because I coached college football. I've gone through those experiences. I don't mind criticizing a coach because you don't do your job. You deserve criticism. There's just certain lines that I just am not comfortable with, because I feel like, okay, you wouldn't have liked that when you were like, when I was a coach, I had no problem with people criticizing the job my guys did. None. You start talking about firing me and stuff like that. Like, now you're making it personal. You know what I mean? Like, criticizing me for the job I did, saying I'm not doing a good enough job, I'm not doing that. That's fair game. People can criticize me for the job I'm doing now. You start saying, dude, you don't have any business doing this. You should be fired. You should be this. Okay, now it's personal. And that's just kind of where I'm at. I hope that makes sense. And it's not judging people who do it differently. Like I said, I don't judge those guys for that. It's not as they're not viewing it as a sign of disrespect because they come from a different background. I view it as a sign of disrespect if I did it because I do come from that background. Now, I don't think they would view it as disrespectful, but I do because of that background. I mean, and some coaches that I talk to at Notre Dame used to be at Notre Dame, they still call me coach. And they know I'm not a coach anymore. And it's simply because it's kind of like when you're in that life, you're always kind of part of that life. And there's certain lines you don't cross, in my opinion, when you're doing that. And for me, publicly calling for another coach to be fired for anything other than unethical behavior, in my opinion, it's just not something I'm comfortable with. But if other people want to do it, respect that. You got to do what you feel is best for you. So I hope that answers your question, and I hope that you don't take me my unwillingness to answer your question, Joseph, as any kind of disrespect towards you. It's not at all, because I think it's a fair question. All right. Okay, let's go to Beezer 12 Washing Beard. You're an AD for a college program. Has Coach Freeman showed enough so far for you to hand him the keys? Hand the keys to him. I'm not sure what you're referring to at this point in time. Are you referring to? I'm not sure what you're talking about there. You're talking about like giving him an extension? I mean, I think Marcus Freeman, I'll just say this. I think Marcus Freeman as a football coach has shown a lot of promise. There's a lot of things he does very well. He's a great representative of the institution. He's very well respected. He treats people, from everything I've ever heard, from alums, from students, from parents. Everyone's going to there's always going to be some people that don't like the job you do. I understand that. But by and large, it's been, hey, he's a genuine dude. He's good. He's this, he's that. That's important to me, especially at a place like Notre Dame, because even though in a lot of ways Notre Dame's Catholic connection is like it stops at certain places, like, yeah, okay, we're Catholic, but we still do this and we still do that. Okay, so you're only Catholic when it matters most, matters in certain situations, in my opinion, but you're still a Catholic institution, meaning your head football coach should be at least a decent human being. I think it's kind of important, and Marcus Freeman is. And from everything I know of him, I don't know him very well. I mean, we've never hung out socially. We've never talked really outside of the capacity of our jobs. Like, I don't know him like that, but I know a lot of people who know him, a lot of people that run into him. And I mean, I've even had people like run into his wife. I had a guy one time said his wife was there, and he went up to her and said hi, and she was super polite and gracious and all that type of stuff. And you like hearing that, right? And he's a decent person. He's obviously a strong recruiter. There's a lot of things he does well. There's just some things that right now he needs to do better in order to be a championship caliber coach. And until he does that, I'm not ready to say, hey, let's talk extension just yet. That's my thing. Now, would I be willing to have a conversation with him after the season about something that's kind of like, okay, we're going to sign you to an extension because, perception wise, we've got to do this and that. There's some things that I would do in that regard. To kind of say, because there does have to be this level of perception of we support the coach, but it wouldn't necessarily be like, hey, let's give him a big old pay raise and keys to the kingdom type of thing. It wouldn't be that at this point in time. Andrew Gilmore, I'm sorry, that was for someone else. Let's go to Ronnie Reeves. Thank you, Ronnie. Ronnie, are you still mad at me because we disagree on the player of the game? I hope you're not still mad at me for that. But Ronnie says, if Freeman won't turn his offense loose with the defense backing it up, then will he ever? That's a fair question. That's a fair question, Ronnie. Look, here's the deal. Until he does it, we don't know that he will. And people say, well, Mike Denbrock has full autonomy. Not really, because anytime the head coach says to do something, you're supposed to do it. So It's a great question. I mean, will he ever? I hope so. It's all I can say is I hope so. You hope that eventually enough things happen to where it's kind of like, okay, man, I got to turn you loose, and let you go do what you're comfortable with. And that doesn't mean throwing 80 bombs. That's not who Mike Denbrock is. That's not who Jared Parker was. It's not who Tommy Reese was. Look, I got to be willing to let you do what you do, even if I think that may lead to a mistake, because you got to do what you're comfortable with. And if I don't think that that's good enough, then I need to go hire somebody else to do it. Insured by Big. So, hey, I'm curious what your thoughts are about what I said about LSU earlier, and see kind of what your thoughts are about how LSU's been so far this season. I'm very curious what a fair, objective US LSU fans thinks, and I think you are definitely that. So I'd be very curious kind of what you think of how they've looked so far this season. Here's a question. With politics and cultural sensitivities evolving, Notre Dame might one day change its mascot. If that happens, what new mascot would you choose that honors university values? I would never change the mascot. If you ever give in to that, if someone is that sensitive, their opinion should not matter to you about this type of topic. I'm sorry. I can say that because I'm Irish. And so I get told I'm not allowed to have an opinion about this because I'm not that. I'm not allowed to opinion about this because I'm Irish. I have zero problem with that. You're the Fighting Irish. Oh my God, you think we all fight? Shut up. I think that in these type of institutions, when people are that sensitive, it's our job as society to make them not as sensitive. Hey, you got to learn to put your big girl pants on and put your big boy pants on, and stop catering to the most sensitive, weak people in our society. There are certain things that's not appropriate. There's always lines, but something like the Fighting Irish is not something that anyone that if you have a problem with that, that's a you thing. I'm sorry, you don't. And since I am Irish, I can speak on that. And if they change the name to Fighting Irish, I'll be pissed. I'll be super pissed. Have you guys seen how Ireland treats Notre Dame when they go over there? They freaking love Notre Dame. So if they're not mad about it, then you should shut up and not be mad about it. And that would really bother me. Really bother me. And I will not entertain any notion of Notre Dame changing their mascot. And if they do change their mascot because they're soft as the people that do complain about it, then I will have some very harsh things to say about Notre Dame. Yeah, very harsh things. So as an Irish person, this is one that I am allowed to talk about. And I would say that I would be super pissed. And part of the reason that I liked Notre Dame is because it gave a shout out to what my family said our heritage is. I don't really get into that kind of stuff. I'm an American. I don't really care where people I've never met came from. But in this instance, I'm going to use it to my advantage because it's one of the few times I'm actually supposedly allowed to speak on a subject. So, I have no problem with it. No problem with it at all. At all. So, yeah, go Irish. That's what I'll keep saying, and won't entertain any other thoughts otherwise. So I don't know if anybody else agrees with me on that or not, but honestly, I don't care because it's something that I'm definitely passionate about. So, all right, insured by Big. Is Notre Dame the college football version of the Dallas Cowboys? National team with big fan base, but it's been a while since a head coach. Yeah. I mean, Dallas has won a title before Notre Dame has, certainly. So, I mean, I know that you're asking that sort of a pejorative, but it's also true. I don't think Notre Dame gets the hype every year that Dallas does, only to be super disappointing. If you look at Notre Dame's preseason rankings compared to what they end up every year, they're usually ranked pretty fairly from where they start and where they finish, whereas Dallas gets hype as a Super Bowl team, and then they end up being 8-8 or whatever. So, but as far as hasn't won in a while, but still considered like America's team, certainly there's always a tie to the Cowboys and Notre Dame in that regard. Absolutely. Stephen B., any thoughts at all on Aeneas Williams? I was mesmerized by his high school tape. Could he get more chances in the passing game as the season goes on? I mean, he already is, Stephen. I mean, you're already seeing him more and more, and we saw him on Saturday against Purdue when the game was still in doubt. I think it was their second touchdown drive. They're in a 3rd and 8, and they run a quick draw, and they run that draw to him. I'm like, I'd much rather see him get the ball there than Devin Ford, with all due respect to Devin Ford, because I think Aeneas is a playmaker. And he made a great run, just got behind his line, made that cut, and then carried the guy to the first down marker. They were in 2-down territory, so that's why they were comfortable running that play. But Aeneas went and made the play. I was pumped about that. Like I could certainly see him getting more third down touches. And I don't know about like pass game stuff a ton, but in some of those third down looks, yeah, absolutely. Beezus says his earlier question, you can hire anybody. Would you hire Marcus? I mean, it's hard to answer that question because he's not a free agent. He already is the coach. I mean, if I could hire anybody as the head coach at Notre Dame, I'd hire myself because I would love that salary. That salary would be awesome. I don't think I'd, do a very good job, but I'd love that salary and the buyout for a couple of years. I mean, that'd be pretty nice. But in all seriousness, it's not that I'm unwilling to do a hypothetical. It's just it's kind of unnecessary at that point in time because it's like he is the coach, and I don't know that he's done anything to make another school say, "Boy, we got to break the bank to get Marcus Freeman here." I don't know that that's the case, and that's what I was kind of saying earlier is like if I were to do a quote unquote extension with Marcus Freeman, it wouldn't be a giant pay raise. It would be more about, okay, but we're going to give ourselves some protection and create a bigger buyout from an outside entity and maybe lower our buyout if we want to move on or something like that. But, like, look, I'm glad even as frustrated as I am from 2 weeks, I'm still glad Marcus Freeman's head coach of Notre Dame because I want to see what he can do. I've not given up you know what, this game, I'm done with him. And I have some friends that are that way. I'm done with him. I'm not there. I'm not at that point in time. I still want to see what he can do. I still want to see what he can do. And, the clock's always ticking, right? But, yeah. Yeah. I mean, seriously, Brian, or Steven, I mean, hire me as a coach for a year. I get that salary for a year, and then you fire me and I get a $50 million buyout. Okay, cool. That's the only reason I would hire myself. But that's kind of where I'm at. I'm glad he's the head coach of Notre Dame. I'm still excited to see what he can do, and hopefully he can learn from some of those mistakes. All right, let's get down to here a few more before we get out of here. James Rhodes, does Notre Dame try to roll the pocket to help Riley get the ball down the field? Would cut field in half for him and allow him not to worry as much about O-line blocking. Jared, it's a little harder to hit deep shots on rollouts. If you're going to do like a half roll, maybe. But half roll, you still have to worry about the offensive line. And I never loved half rolls as a quarterback because when you're rolling out and then stopping, you're kind of doing that sink protection backside. And if you miss one of those, man, I got ear hold on one of those in college. And it's not pleasant. I've never liked that protection very much. But, I mean, the only time I can only really remember a quarterback taking a deep shot on a rollout. You guys remember in 2010, Dane Chris did that against Michigan. They ran a flood concept play side, and it was a go route to TJ Jones. You had an out cut and then a slide cut, and he threw the go. And normally on floods, teams don't that the go is just a clear, but Dane threw the go and hit it for a touchdown against Michigan in 2010. You don't often see that type of deep shot get hit on a rollout. I would say, something like play action where you simplify his reads there, maybe some half field reads, a little half boot, something along those lines, would be a little bit more preferable for me than a sprint out. Now, I do think that some sprint out stuff is there. Like, I do like rolling the pocket, Jared. In theory, I like the idea. We saw it last week, but I am more of that's chain moving stuff. That's getting guys in space type of stuff. There's certainly opportunities to do that. I just don't know that necessarily helps you with the deep game a whole lot. Now, one instance would be is if you're going to do something like that with like a throwback. So if you remember, I believe he booted. It was 2018 against Stanford. I believe it was a bootleg. I'm actually going to look that up. But Ian Book booted right and then threw backside to Alize Mack. Give me a second. I'm going to look that play up. I believe it was like a half roll bootleg that he threw backside, something like that. But I don't know that necessarily like that could help you with, because like there's two things like, okay, that could get you a big play, right? And you could get a big play for that. But does that necessarily get you to a point where comfortable throwing the deep ball because you hit that throw? I don't know that it does that. Like, it doesn't fix anything. It just gives you a chance to hit a big play, but you can't go back to the well on that too many times. So there might be some things like that where you can maybe pop a big play in certain instances and create some of those opportunities. But overall, he's going to have to do a better job of in the pocket reading defenses, whether it be pure dropbacks or whether it be play actions or things like that. It's just something he's going to have to do a better job of. So I'm looking at that play. Yeah, Ian did a sort of like a rollout to the right, planted, threw backside to Alize Mack. It was only about a 12-yard throw downfield, and Alize went for a touchdown. So that wasn't a deep shot. So he did bootleg, but it wasn't a deep shot. It was a far throw, but it was all the way backside. So yeah. All right. Got Andrew Gilmore. If Chip Kelly had gone to Florida instead of UCLA, would Florida and Kelly be in a better position right now? I don't think so. Chip Kelly needs to be at the right place. Chip Kelly needs to be at a place where he doesn't have to do as much handshaking and alumni, kiss the ring moments and not alumni, booster kiss the ring moments and getting out and seeing a bunch of people. He's a football coach, man. He needs to be somewhere that he can just go coach football and do the occasional thing. And he's not a great recruiter. I thought UCLA was a pretty decent gig for him. I don't know that Florida would be a whole lot better, to be honest with you. I don't. And I mean, I'd have to go back. I don't want to say it because I'd have to go back and look, but I wonder if Chip kind of knew that he's not a fit there. ICO5, are you nervous about the lack of receiver production over the last few weeks, which hurt in recruiting moving forward? I mean, it could. I'm not nervous about it. It's something that's going to have to get better. And if it doesn't improve quickly, it could become an even bigger problem. But I'm not necessarily concerned about it from a hurting a recruiting standpoint because it is still kind of early. But if this continues all season, it's just going to be like, okay, third quarter in a row and the receiver production is not there. It's going to impact recruiting. I'd be lying to you if I said it wasn't. I'm just not. There's not a lot that I'm concerned about in week 3 outside of, okay, you've now had 3 injuries at that position. It's like, okay, it's time to figure some things out. So, yeah. All right. Stephen B., who do you think is starting at quarterback next year? I think it'll be CJ Carr, Kenny Minchie. That's who I think. There's a lot that's got to happen between now and then, but to me, it would be one of those two type of guys. It would be one of them. And let me find that out. Aiden Benami's 2-part question. I know we lost to NIU. I know, but dear Lord, there is not one person in media who thinks we're good at all. Maybe we're not, but I still think the team we thought before the season and after A&M, I mean, I will take the easy points as a lock. Well, I mean, I'm technically in the media, and I think we're good. And Ryan Roberts is in the media, and he thinks Notre Dame's pretty good. And I mean, I it's not that I think people are good. I think people look at that and say, well, they don't know what Notre Dame's going to be. But I've told you guys this before, and I try to help you guys. I say these things not to troll or to get points or anything like that, but I say these things to try to help you guys understand. So your reactions are you don't have the emotional reactions because like I used to be that way. No longer I've been in this business, you start to see things a certain way, and it's why I told you guys, hey, if Notre Dame beats A&M, here's what they're going to do. They're going to react this way. And the nature of media is no longer to just report the news and provide honest analysis. It's now, because it's all driven by, hey, I could give you the best analysis in the world, but if we're not making money, then I'm going to be fired, right? So I've got to do things to, drive revenue. So, you hire a guy that curses and drinks beer on TV that wears a tank top and try to spin that off as analysis, right? Or, it's like, okay, well, some people like that, some people don't. It is what it is, but why does he have a job? He doesn't have a job because of the analysis he provides. He has a job because he sells. And I respect that. I respect the fact that it sells. It's just not for me. It's not my taste. It's not something I enjoy to watch. So I don't. For people to do, Good for you. I mean, it's good. I think there should be different types of things, but it's not about good analysis anymore. It's about storylines. It's about narratives, and the media creates narratives so that they have things to talk about all year. I mean, that's the only way a 24-hour, 365 news cycle can work, is if you're creating narratives. We see this in politics and stuff. It's like, well, it's a 24-hour news cycle now. It didn't used to be that way, so you gotta create narratives, because otherwise, if you don't, you don't have anything to talk about. And with Notre Dame, they're going to love on Notre Dame when Notre Dame's good. But the first time Notre Dame gives them a chance to bang on them, they're going to bang on them. And it's not even because they necessarily hate Notre Dame. It's because that's what sells. And then if Notre Dame goes on a roll and wins a bunch of games, they're going to love on Notre Dame again until they lose a game, and they're going to hate on Notre Dame again. I told you guys this about Deion. I said, look, they're going to build Deion up until the moment he starts to fail, and then they're going to be the first ones tearing him down. Why? Because that sells. That's what sells. And Deion is a hot topic. Whether if he's good, he's a hot topic. If he's bad, he's a hot topic. And so and then you also have this sort of group thing that goes on. And so, look, I look at it this way, man, and I say, there's plenty of people that I've heard that have still saying good things about Notre Dame. Now, I don't know that. I don't know who you listen to, but in passing or talking to people or reading people, I know people in the sports media that just still thinks Notre Dame's a very good football team. Bill Bender, who's the main college football writer for Sporting News, he still thinks Notre Dame's a good football team, which is why the Northern Illinois game was so freaking frustrating, because this is a good football team. And Notre Dame deserves to get hammered for that. They deserve to get hammered for losing to Northern Illinois. And I don't have a problem with anyone saying that was a bad loss and crushing Notre Dame for that. You deserve that. So, look, sometimes your favorite team deserves to get hammered. This is the fact. And when you're a top 5 team and you're the number 5 team in the country and you lose at home to a team that you were a 4-touchdown favor over, guess what? You deserve to get hammered. And that's why I think most of this is. But the reality is you have to understand the nature of what this business is now. It is not about going to give, like for me, it is. And there's certain individuals that do that, right? I don't want to sit there and say nobody at ESPN or whatever is an honest individual. I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying just by nature, it's more entertainment than it is we're just providing good analysis, right? And that's the nature. But I know there's plenty of people that cover Notre Dame that still think they're a good team, but they're like me. They were frustrated by the loss. And you wonder, like, okay, great, you bounce back for 1 week, but 1 week bounce back doesn't mean you're not going to have another game like this down the road. And, if I am being honest, then you have to think about that. So that's where it's at. So anyway, that's kind of my thoughts on that. Raymond Harton, what do you think about Mel Kiper's take on the NFL should stop allowing too high safeties because it's stopping the quarterbacks from being able to throw the ball down the field, deep down the field? Number one, you can still throw the ball deep down the field against cover 2. That's just nonsense. Cover 2 is not some new thing. Cover 2's been around forever. I mean, cover 2's been. I mean, Miami back in 2000 was a pure 2-man team, from what I can remember. So, I would say a couple things. Number one, find different ways to run to throw against those. Find different ways to attack those type of routes. I mean, I tell a story about how we threw an 80-yard touchdown pass against cover 2 back when I was coaching back in 2003, and like here's the thing. I thought Mark Schlereth had the best answer to this. He said, run the football more. Run the football more, and teams are going to get out playing cover 2. Teams aren't going to run a whole lot of cover 2 against the 2000 or 1997 Denver Broncos, 1998 Denver Broncos. They're just going to run it on you all day. You got no chance to stop it. Teams aren't going to play a whole lot of cover 2 when they're playing Alabama 2011 or 2012. They're just not. Alabama 2015. They're just not. You got to get an extra guy in the box. So here's the thought. If you want teams stop playing as much cover 2, run the ball better. Run the ball more effectively. Find different ways to get back to certain concepts that you can be effective out of that. Find different ways to motion and shift and get them out of that kind of stuff. So, like something's not in the thing he said, and I saw the clip today. Saw a little bit of it yesterday, and then saw it more again today. And it's just one of those things where if you don't like something, don't outlaw the thing that's making it hard on offensive coaches. Demand that offensive coaches find better answers. And you've got all these offensive coaches that come from a similar tree and similar thought process. and they're going out there and they all kind of do the same thing. And then, this tree of coaching is popular. So let's hire 87,000 disciples of Sean McVay and Andy Reid. And then it's like, okay, then everyone's running kind of similar offenses. And there's kind of a way to beat that because a lot of people are doing it. Well, go back and run the football better. Be more effective with this. Find this matchup. Use this motion and shift to attack it. The dink and dunk is not happening because teams are playing cover two. I would argue that teams are playing a lot of cover two because teams were dinking and dunking. And this is a way to stop the dinking and dunking. I don't think teams did cover two because, they want to stop all the deep balls that were happening in the NFL. I don't remember the NFL throwing a ton of deep balls a lot recently outside of 3 or 4 quarterbacks. So, if defenses are doing something that give you problems, and adjust and adapt and evolve and don't make rules to stop it, right? Like rules should be made. Like when there was a period of time in the NFL where they were basically letting corners get away with murder. I mean, I just shouldn't say that. They were manhandling receivers. You're like, that's not football. Or at least that's not modern football anyway, right? In a modern pass game, like you're breaking rules by getting advantage. Emphasize calling that more. That's different. But to say, well, you can't have 2 safeties deep because we're bored watching football. Okay, then maybe your team should hire coaches that know how to go at that better and aren't stuck in their little dink and dunk world. And, oh, gee, they're doing this to stop us. Let's change the rules instead of being innovative and finding ways to beat it. So that's kind of where I'm at. So, get better. Get better, offensive coaches. Right? Find schemes that work. Go back and watch some film to the 1980s. They knew how to throw against cover two. Maybe do that. Here's a thought. And when you're watching 1980s football, maybe you're going to see like, hey, wow, they run the football. They have actually running backs. Here's the thing. They actually have running backs whose primary job was to run the football. And not pass block, not catch passes, and then but to actually, it's crazy for you. They would actually turn around. They'd get under center. They'd get a snap under center. They turn around and hand the ball off to the running back. And they do that like 20 times a game. Swear to you. True story. True story. If you're listening via podcast platform, I'm being very sarcastic. And I think the people watching me can tell that I'm being very sarcastic. But that's what I love about sports. It's, you get good at something, and it's up to the other side of the ball to adapt. And then when they adapt, you have to adapt to their adaptations. And that's the fun of it. But to just come out here and say, change the rules is pretty lame. And I would hope that there aren't coaches saying that. So get better on offense. Run the ball. Find different ways to attack cover two. And then they'll stop doing it as much. Pretty simple. So anyway, that's my 2 cents on that. Last one, Archer 452. This past weekend had some of the worst officiating I've ever seen, especially in regards to targeting and roughing the passer in 15 years. How much physicality do you think is removed from the game? Oh, it's going to get worse and worse and worse, man. Worse and worse and worse. Because, here's the thing. As players in college start making more money, it's going to go the NFL route where, hey, I'm paying this guy X amount of dollars. I need him protected more. I can't afford to have my $50 million quarterback injured because we treat him like a football player. Imagine that. So that's just the reality of it. And it's going to get worse, Archer. It's going to get worse in college. It's just a lot of things that are happening in the NFL right now. It's like I've shared the story before, but somebody put a clip a few years ago of Sean Taylor, Miami, just laying people out. And my response was targeting. Sean Taylor would never have finished a game in college. Never, and he would have played half the season because he would have got kicked out of either the first half of every game, or if he made it to the second half, he'd have got kicked out of the second half and then wouldn't be able to play the first half of the next game. He'd have got kicked out almost every game. Steve Atwater would have had to move to linebacker, or he would have got kicked out of every game. Like when I was a kid, the Broncos had 2 safeties, Dennis Smith and Steve Atwater. They literally would have got, not literally, I'm being hyperbolic here. They would have got kicked out of almost every game. And there's some of the things that, I watched some games from the 60s and 70s. Oh my God, they were trying to hurt each other. That's not okay. But, big hits should still be part of the game. But it's not, because players are commodities, right? And if I'm giving this commodity $20 million, I don't want there to be things that could get this guy hurt. I'm going to protect him as much as possible. And that's where the business side of it kind of ruins the sport of it, to be honest with you. And it's coming to college football. And that's just brace yourself for it, man. Brace yourself for it, and just accept the fact that that's kind of how it's going to be. All right. So yeah, don't disagree. Don't disagree. But let's be honest, even now, if there are things you can do even now on a football field, that if you did it at a restaurant, you'd get arrested. Go up to a guy and line up in a line up in a 2-point stance and come out and drive him off the ball like you would a defensive tackle and get arrested. You know what I mean? So there's a lot of things like that. But I think what your joke is, like, those things are you'd get arrested for what you did on the field. Now it's like, it's Jack Tatum, Jack Lambert. Who was the guy for the Raiders? They had a safety, George Atkinson, who I've actually met a couple times. Good dude. Like, there'd be cops waiting on for him in the locker room. Like, okay, the receiver for the other team pressed charges against you. We're going to have to arrest you. It would get crazy if they played the game today like they did back then. So yeah. But anyway, hey guys, I enjoyed today. I hope you all enjoyed today. A lot of great questions today. I really appreciate all of you guys very much, and dealing with my rants and sticking through it. I always get excited when we have more people in the show watching at the end than we had at the beginning. I feel like that means that we had a good show, and today's show is dominated by you guys. And so I really appreciate you guys being here today, and apologize that I wasn't here last week, but I'm glad to be back, and that's fun. DJ Holman, that's a great comment. DJ, teams don't adapt anymore. They just hire what's working. That is such a great point. Such a great point. You are absolutely right. That's working. Let's go hire that guy. Yeah, 100%. Such a good point. It's a great way to end it, man. So everyone, have an awesome rest of your day. IB Nation will have the countdown to kickoff published later tonight. And then, of course, we'll have our post-game show tomorrow. Ryan and Vince and Sean and Trevor will all be back tomorrow for the post-game show. I know they're going to have do a great job. We've got our predictions at irishbreakdown.com for Notre Dame and in Miami. We also did predictions for Tennessee, Oklahoma, USC, Michigan, Utah, Oklahoma State. You can check that out. Have about 3 recruiting articles coming up later today, 2 from Sean Davis, 1 from Nick Kramer that I'll have up later today. So of some guys visiting this weekend. And who knows, there may be some recruiting news this weekend. We'll see. And if there is, then we'll do a show about it. No doubt about it. So appreciate you all being with us here today. I will talk to you guys all again very soon. Hit that like button on your way out. Make sure you're subscribed on your way out. And when you hit that end or you hit the leave, make sure that you're leaving by going over to boards.irishbreakdown.com to sign up for your membership. So thanks for being with me today, everybody. And I'll talk to you again very soon on the Irish Breakdown Podcast.